One, two, three, one, two, three.
Good morning. I'm at-large Councilmember Christina Henderson, Chair of the Committee on Health. Today is Monday, April 20th, 2026. The time is 9:02 a.m. We are in room 500 of the John A. Wilson Building. This is a hybrid hearing where we'll hear from public witnesses, both in person and via the Zoom internet platform. This hearing is also being broadcast live on cable channel 13, as well as on my YouTube page at CMC Henderson. I'm calling this meeting of the Committee on Health to order. This is part one of two of oversight hearings for the proposed FY 2027 budget for the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, as well as the Department of Behavioral Health. Today we'll hear from the public witnesses, and on Friday we'll hear from Karima Woods, who is the Commissioner of Disby, as well as Dr. Barbara Bazaron, who is the Director of Department of Behavioral Health. Both directors and their teams are listening and watching today's hearing, and we anticipate them to be responsive to some of the concerns and issues that were raised today. A little bit of background about both agencies. First, the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, Disby, works to protect district consumers from unfair and abusive practices while fostering an equitable business environment for regulated entities operating in the district. Disby's mission is threefold. One, cultivate a regulatory environment that protects consumers and attracts and retains financial service firms to the district. Two, empower and educate residents on financial matters. And three, provide financing for district small businesses. Disby operates four bureaus, the Insurance Bureau, which regulates insurance companies and producers. The Securities Bureau, which regulates investment advisors, broker deals, and security issues. The Banking Bureau, which regulates the district and state chartered banks, mortgage lenders and brokers, money lenders, and student loan servicers, and then the Risk Finance Bureau, which regulates the captive insurance companies. Disby also operates an Office of Financial Empowerment and Education, Compliance and Analysis Division, and an Enforcement and Consumer Protection Division. The Department of Behavioral Health, or DBH, provides prevention, intervention, treatment services for children, youth, and adults living with mental health and substance use disorders. These services include emergency psychiatric care and a range of community-based outpatient residential supports. Disby serves eligible residents and their families through a network of community-based and government services, manages the district's school-based behavioral health program, and oversees the spending of the district's opioid settlement funds, as well as operating St. Elizabeth's Hospital, which is the district's inpatient psychiatric facility. DBH performs vital and often challenging work guided by the belief that every resident has the capacity to recover from mental illness and substance use disorders and lead fulfilling, healthy, and successful life. I don't see any of my council colleagues with us today, but if they join us, we'll certainly welcome them. Before we begin, I want to just talk about our testimony guidelines for today. So we want to hear from everyone. And because we want to hear from everyone only has 3 minutes to testify because we do have a lengthy witness list on today. There will be a clock. If you're in person, there are multiple clocks. If you're online, if you put us in gallery view, you'll see the timer there for you. I actually need to talk about this now because our first panel is hybrid. For our public witnesses who are with us virtually, you'll have to affirmatively accept our invitation to be elevated to become a panelist. So there'll be a little box that pops up on your screen, and then we'll go from there. All right, so let's get started. We only have 4 witnesses for Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, so we're going to call all 4, which include 2 people in person as well as 2 virtual witnesses. Arthur Slade, who's the Vice President of AFSCME, Local 2743. Stephen Schaff, or Schaaf, from Community Finance Academy. Am I saying that right? All right. Rachel Hugh from Community Wealth Builders, and Bree McGowan from DC Community Wealth Builders. And those last 2 are virtual. So for Rachel and Bree, you'll need to affirmatively accept our invitation to become a panelist. Just give it just a minute. Okay. All right. They haven't joined us yet. I guess, Monday mornings are hard for everybody, but Mr. Slade, you are here. So when you're ready.
All right. Good morning. Good morning, Chairperson Henderson and members of the committee. My name is Arthur Slade, Vice President of ASME Local 2743, representing employees at Disby. Our members carry out the core regulatory work that protects consumers, stabilizes markets, and ensures confidence in the district's financial systems. I want to focus on three issues that directly affect Disby's performance and the agency's ability to meet its statutory obligations. First, workforce alignment and classification. Many Disby employees are performing examiner level, enforcement level, and analyst level duties that are not reflected in their position descriptions or classifications. This misalignment suppresses wages, drives turnovers, and creates operational risk. We are asking the council to require a full classification audit in FY27 with updated PDs, transparent timelines, and union participation. Disby's mission is too technical and too high stakes to rely on outdated and inaccurate classifications. Second, vacancies and operational risk. Disby continues to operate with vacancies in enforcement. These gaps slow down enforcement actions, which directly impacts the residents of the district. Third, accountability and retaliation concerns. Our union has documented instances where employees engaged in protected activity faced adverse actions shortly thereafter. This creates a chilling effect and undermines morale. We are asking for a retaliation prevention protocol, mandatory supervisory training, and annual reporting on adverse actions broken down by division. As outlined within the performance oversight hearing testimony submission of February 24th, 2026, the union maintains that at least 5 FTEs within the Enforcement Consumer Protection Division are more appropriately classified under the Federal Criminal Investigation Series 1811, for which 2024 DCR HR desk audit submissions are pending to date. Finally, to increase transparency around special purpose revenue, Disby manages significant SPR funds, but employees often lack clarity on how those dollars support staffing, enforcement, and modernization. A public SPR allocation report would help ensure these funds are used to strengthen core regulatory functions. In closing, ASME Local 2743 respectfully requests that the Committee on Health support unions with the restoration of approximately $127 million for FY27 and appropriated during previous budgeting cycles for collective bargaining agreements and non-collectively bargained employees, many of whom are tax-paying district residents. Thank you for this opportunity to testify, and I'm available to address any questions.
Thank you. Rachel?
Hello. My name is Rachel, and I am a part of the DC Community Wealth Builders, a coalition dedicated to shifting DC's development model towards community ownership, democratic governance, and locally rooted wealth. I'm testifying to advocate for a DC public bank. I think we can all agree that there's an affordability crisis in DC. I live close to Chinatown, where my aunties and uncles are being pushed out of the homes they've lived in for generations because the rent keeps rising. I used to work as a barista on U Street, but had to leave because our cafe, like many other small businesses, was squeezed out. And don't even get me started about the skyrocketing energy prices we're all experiencing. But what if I told you there is a way we could fund the city infrastructure we need to address these crucial gaps while even generating revenue for DC? Right now, DC's public dollars sit in private banks, fueling business lending wherever those banks choose, but we have no control over where that lending goes. As a result, it keeps funding the same types of developments we already have, mostly outside DC. Simultaneously, when we're actually trying to fund crucial city needs, like affordable housing or behavioral health infrastructure, private lenders underinvest because it's not profitable enough. So we sell bonds to finance projects we want to pencil and are stuck in a cycle paying interest to those bondholders. A public bank would directly transform that structure. Instead of depositing public funds into private institutions, DC would place a portion of its money into its own bank. That bank could then use those deposits to provide low-cost financing for local priorities, filling gaps the private market avoids. Any interest earned would be reinvested into the bank, staying within the public system and continuing to fund things like deeply affordable housing, grocery stores, childcare, support for small businesses, green energy infrastructure. The list really goes on and on. I urge you to take the next step by finishing the 2020 Disby study of a DC public bank. The previous study contained gaps in important data, such as the potential debt service savings of the bank. It also did not account for the potential increased capacity of existing local financial institutions like CDFIs. This proposal doesn't require new taxes or new spending. It uses the same public dollars more strategically, turning passive assets into an active tool for meeting DC's needs. We need the mayor to be able to move these transformative ideas forward. I hope you will do the right thing and put DC's wealth to work for the communities of DC. Thank you.
Thank you. Bree? Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Councilmember Henderson. I'm also a volunteer with the DC Community Wealth Builders, and I'm deeply interested and curious about the economic power and wisdom of cooperation. So as a grassroots advocate, I believe how we structure financial institutions is a moral and political choice. So public banking is cooperation in action. As Rachel mentioned, it's about pooling community resources to serve community needs. A DC public bank could put the city's existing cash reserves to work, allowing us to make loans based on our values and at interest rates that community institutions can afford. So right now, the costs of banking are disproportionately loaded onto everyday consumers through fees, penalties, and predatory interest rates, while the profits flow upward to wealthy shareholders. A public bank flips that model. Banks generate enormous revenue through interest. The question isn't whether that money will be made, but rather who does it go to? Under a public bank, those funds flow back into DC's coffers rather than into private pockets. So it's not a radical idea, it's just a different set of beneficiaries. Instead of bank shareholders, it's shareholders of the city, the people of DC. So progressives are constantly asked, well, where is the money going to come from? And too often, transformative ideas stall there. A public bank is one credible structural answer to that question. It's a self-sustaining revenue engine that could fund the kinds of bold, long-term investments that have long been dismissed as pie in the sky, as Rachel had mentioned. So DC cannot afford to be wholly dependent on federal government for its financial footing, as we also know. The political winds in DC have shifted, and our budget and services are vulnerable. A public bank gives DC a tool to generate its own revenue, build its own reserves, and pay off our debt more cheaply and fund our future on our own terms. So this, in my opinion, is a step towards strengthening DC for statehood. We cannot afford to not follow through on that previous study that Rachel just mentioned that was done by Disby, where we can begin to fix our fiscal situation. Economic growth needs to be built on local financial infrastructure like a public bank, not the fragile and failed approach of endless corporate incentives. We must fill in the blanks of the public study that was done by Disby that was left off and let the mayor and the CFO begin to create it. So I ask you to use this as a way to move this conversation forward as a part of the budget. Thank you for listening to my testimony.
Thank you. And Stephen's not here, correct? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much to this panel of witnesses for your testimony. I just want to ask a couple of follow-up questions. Mr. Slade, when was the last time that a classification audit was conducted at Disby, to your knowledge?
I'm not sure. I have no idea.
Okay.
I think that some of the PDs or position descriptions of the employees are dated, I want to say in the early 2000s.
Okay.
So it's been a significant amount of time since some of those series have been updated to reflect the technical approach and the broad services of the financial sector that's expanded since that time. And the regulatory content is ever changing, particularly in the financial markets as well as the insuring markets, as you well know.
Yeah. And I know that other agencies have done classification audits or changes. So it's not uncommon. I'm just curious in terms of when was the last one was conducted. And I certainly hear you, excuse me, on the testimony around the Workforce Investment Fund. That was one of the questions that I had for the mayor last week when we did the budget unveiling. There are a lot of unions who've been waiting. I've got some unions who are already in arbitration, and to just sort of put that on hold, I think is unfair. So we're certainly going to try to sort of work on that. But thank you.
Anything you can do would be extremely helpful because it's the working class citizens of the district, and that money was allocated through other budgeting cycles, as I mentioned in my testimony.
Yeah.
And now for it to be suddenly just taken back, as well as you can imagine, it leaves several unions in a very uncompromising position, particularly when we want to try to negotiate with the city and make sure that we keep up with the cost of living, the Middle East crisis that's going on and driving up energy costs throughout the globe, as well as local tax dollars, and trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet in this critical time.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Rachel and Bree, thank you for being here and for your testimony as well. Just for clarification, I think, Rachel, you might have said that Disby conducted a study on this in 2020, maybe?
Yes, there's an existing study on public banks, and our request would be to finish that existing study and fill in any gaps and findings on things like potential debt savings.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not familiar with that study, but we'll certainly look for it and take a look. I don't have any further questions. Thank you all. If you could please upload your testimony for the record, just go online, send it in.
You should have a copy of mine.
Okay. If we don't have a copy, but thank you.
I can upload it again,
you very
but thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Thank you all. I'm going to go to our next panel. Kimberly Harrington. Okay. Maya Wise. Or Maya, excuse me. Sorry, everybody pronounces it a little different. Kristen Ewing and Jacqueline Berner. Okay. All right, Ms. Harrington, when you're ready.
Good morning, Councilmember Henderson and members of the Health Committee. My name is Kimberly Harrington, and I'm a longtime DC resident in Ward 4 and a 20-year employee of DC government. I'm a clinical social worker, a registered play therapist, and a member and delegate of 1199 SEIU United Healthcare Workers East. I work for Department of Behavioral Health, School Behavioral Health Program, and am placed at Stuart Hobson Middle School in Ward 6, where I have worked for 10 years. In my role, I provide prevention, intervention, and treatment services. In addition to providing therapy, I collaborate with the school in determining which programs to implement and what their focus will be. Our mental health team facilitates an annual suicide prevention program, and this year started a Youth Mental Health Ambassador Club, which I would like to share about today. Teaming with the school social worker, we invited students of all grades to join the Mental Health Ambassador Club to learn about mental health, share their experiences, and become leaders amongst peers and staff. We had an overwhelming response. Students were asked one question: why would you like to join this club? Each of the approximately 45 students said something similar. They have struggled with mental health and want to help others. This highlights what I've observed in my years with DBH: an increase in emotional literacy, a decrease in mental health stigma, and an increase in mental health needs. Students overwhelmingly talk about stress, anxiety, depression, trauma, and grief. The youth are struggling, and we see this in outward behavior and the statistics around suicidal thoughts and behaviors. DBH's long history of providing school-based mental health services and consistently high staff retention, coupled with our public health model of accepting students regardless of insurance, means we're uniquely positioned to provide support to students and families, as well as teachers and other school staff. Lastly, I'm deeply concerned about the threats posed by federal agents, particularly ICE and all the agencies, including MPD, who support ICE, to the children and families of the District of Columbia. Unfortunately, both DCPS and DBH have been silent on this matter. Although DBH school behavioral health program leadership has acknowledged and addressed this, DBH's upper leadership has not, even though its employees work in schools providing mental health services to students and families who are impacted. DBH must openly and transparently acknowledge the threat posed by ICE harassment and the ongoing military occupation of DC, and lay out a plan to stand up to these threats and support employees as we continue to work with students who are impacted by immigration enforcement and the ongoing presence of National Guard. Thank you for the opportunity to testify and your attention to these matters which impact our children and the future of District of Columbia. I'm happy to answer questions you may have.
Thank you. Maya?
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson and members of the Committee on Health for the opportunity to testify. My name is Maya Wise, and I'm a clinical social worker at the Department of Behavioral Health, working at a pre-K through 8th public charter school in Ward 5, Perry Street Prep. I'm also a member of 1199 SEIU, United Healthcare Workers East. I have been a social worker in DC since 2017, serving DC's children and families in different capacities. I've currently been in my role for just over 1 year. DBH clinicians are deeply experienced and provide evidence-based services. Many have been in the department for a decade or longer. As the budget is evaluated, the department must continue to receive funding for trainings and education that clinicians need to do high-quality work and appropriately serve our community. In my role, I provide individual therapy to students. Some have experienced trauma, witnessed violence, while others may have low self-esteem, depression, or ADHD. My work also includes family therapy sessions and prevention intervention sessions, which might focus on topics including self-esteem, conflict resolution, healthy decision-making, and signs of suicidal ideation. One thing that I hold near and dear to my heart is violence prevention. Teaching students that love is not abuse. Many students cannot independently recognize the signs of domestic violence, or worse, violence is normalized. DBH clinicians help them maintain healthy relationships, identify trusted adults, and communicate with each other. They learn to keep each other accountable and to recognize what type of life they want to live. It is important that the services we provide continue to be available to kids in all DC public and charter schools, regardless of income or health insurance status. Most recently, some of the students' families have been targeted by immigration enforcement. They have had ICE break into their homes and they have been ripped from their parents' arms. And others have had family members deported. Other students are aware of the presence of the National Guard and have been targeted for policing in our communities. In this environment, it is more important than ever that clinicians are compensated appropriately to care for themselves and provide evidence-based care to best serve our student population. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Kristen?
Good morning. My name is Kristen Ewing. I'm Policy Counsel at DC Appleseed and co-chair of the Strengthening Families Coalition. I'm here to urge the committee to protect 3 interconnected programs and to flag a troubling pattern: cutting funding, restructuring without adequate planning, and asking already strained systems to absorb more with less. First, school-based behavioral health. School-based behavioral health funding has fallen from $28 million in fiscal year 24 to a proposed $18.5 million for fiscal year 27, a nearly $10 million cut. And yet this program is vital and demonstrably improving. Thanks to this committee's investment in CBO grants last year, school-based behavioral health is serving more schools with fewer vacancies than at any point in its history. Unfortunately, DBH's proposed comprehensive plan would dismantle the current model and disrupt the relationships that almost 90 CBO clinicians have built with the schools they serve in order to bring the program in-house and in contracts with organizations that have spent years earning the trust of students, families, and educators. And we don't believe the plan has the funding or staffing to succeed. Proposed funding is $3 million less than DBH's own cost estimate in the plan. Also, the plan calls for 83 new FTEs between now and the coming school year, but the combined budgets fund only about 70. Further, DC's fiscal year starts on October 1st, more than a month after schools open. So with the restructuring, recruiting, and hiring processes, many students would start and continue the year without providers. Our ask: restore school-based behavioral health funding to at least the fiscal year 26 level, move the 58 proposed FTE funding back to grants, stabilize the CBO model, and require DBH to evaluate the current model and alternatives with data and real stakeholder input. The second program is CHAMPS, DC's only specialized youth psychiatric crisis service, run by Catholic Charities for over 15 years. Underfunding has already pushed response times from 35 to 58 minutes. DBH's answer is to eliminate the contract and fold youth crisis response into the adult community response team. But children in psychiatric crisis are not small adults, and CRT is not staffed or trained to serve them, and likely doesn't have the funding either. Our youth deserve a tailored, timely, specialized response. Our ask, restore CHAMPS funding to $1.2 million and require DBH to show how it will preserve specialized pediatric crisis response before eliminating the contract. Third, the community response team. CRT is DC's alternative to sending police to behavioral health emergencies. Due to staffing and funding constraints, it already averages 91-minute response times against a 30-minute goal. Yet the proposed budget cuts it by over $2 million, more than 20%. Residents deserve timely responses from trained behavioral health providers, and outcomes are better when they receive them. Our ask, hold CRT flat at $9.85 million, and if DBH transfers the youth crisis response to CRT, invest in the resources that would require. We also urge the committee to include a 988 fee in the Budget Support Act as a sustainable funding stream for these services. This committee and the district have made real commitments to behavioral health, and we ask you to protect them. Thank you, and I'll be submitting written testimony shortly.
Thank you. And Jacqueline.
Good morning, Chairperson Henderson and committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Jacqueline Werner, and I'm an attorney at Disability Rights DC at University Legal Services, the Designated Protection and Advocacy Program for the District of Columbia. Pursuant to our federal mandate, DRDC advocates for hundreds of DC residents with mental illness each year. My testimony today focuses on 4 areas. First, we are very concerned that DBH's fiscal year 27 proposed budget reflects an approximately $14 million reduction to St. Elizabeth's Hospital, resulting in a proposed decrease of 16.5 FTEs. We do not have enough information at this time to know what specific positions this would include. However, overall, this level of reduction in force to St. Elizabeth's is not consistent with the many serious concerns related to patient safety and quality of care that have been raised by staff, advocates, and individuals in care in recent years, including during the roundtable that this committee just held in January. We strongly urge that St. E's not be subjected to this significant reduction in force without ensuring that the hospital census is reduced and appropriate community services are in place to meet the mental health and housing needs of those discharged. Second, we're concerned that DBH's budget does not seem to propose any investments to address the ongoing decline in DBH housing programs. As this committee knows, we continue to be deeply concerned about DBH's trend toward decreasing its support for housing DC residents living with serious mental illness, including by its failure to adequately address rapidly closing mental health community residential facilities, its continued lack of physically accessible CRFs, and its continued incredibly low inventory of housing vouchers that are capped at inequitable rates. DBH's proposed budget shows an increase of $147,000 to housing, residential support, and continuity of services. However, it appears that this will primarily fund just one additional FTE, and it's not giving investments in supporting and increasing housing placements for DBH consumers. It's imperative that the council and DBH work toward identifying financial solutions to address these ongoing problems. Without such support, consumers will cycle in and out of institutional care, and others will remain unhoused, increasing their challenges. Third, we're deeply concerned that this budget appears to entirely eliminate the CHAMPS contract and does not appear to adequately fund the school-based behavioral health program. The combination of these cuts will both weaken much-needed school support services and result in greater reliance on police to address youth mental health crises instead of providing dedicated staff who are specially trained to address the behavioral health needs of children. This short-sightedness will likely result in greater costs to the district, including a greater likelihood of hospitalization and incarceration. Finally, DBH's proposed budget appears to drastically reduce the MHRS local funds budget. Specifically, the proposed budget is showing a roughly $8.5 million reduction to MHRS local funds, which would leave equitable and short-sighted, as community support services can provide much-needed help with guiding consumers to access services that will enable them to avoid hospitalization and incarceration. Thank you again for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Lots of issues raised by all involved. Thank you for your testimony. I want to ask a couple of follow-ups. So, Ms. Wise, I'll start with you. You mentioned in your testimony the need for training and education funding. Normally in the budget line, there is those pieces for, I think it's like training and professional development. Has that been occurring or has that not been occurring? No, it's okay, easy.
Yes, there's been trainings provided by OSSI for like play therapy, art therapy, just different different modalities of like types of therapy that we can provide, and also suicide intervention techniques as well.
But you said provided through OSSI, not through DBH. Okay. What about DBH though? Because DBH has specific funding
Yes,
for training and professional development.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. 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 Kristen, have you been part of the conversations with DBH around the transition on the school-based behavioral health program?
Not outside of the stakeholder input sessions they had that didn't allow for much input.
Okay, so but there not any further conversations since then. Okay. I share your skepticism around the ability to hire as many people as needed. We've shared that with the department after our hearing. I did a letter in terms of what does a real transition plan look like, one that's more realistic than the idea that in the next, I don't know, 5 months, we're going to hire 70 people. That seems ambitious. District government, we're slow on hiring. And so the idea that we're going to hire 70 people before the start of the school year seems a bit ambitious. So we're definitely going to follow up with them on that. Ms. Berner, thank you for being here and for raising some of the issues that you did as well. I'm deeply concerned about the proposed cut at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. There have been ongoing conversations with the nursing staff and otherwise, and frankly, the population of St. Elizabeth's has changed, and instead of increasing the funding to respond to the higher forensic population that's there have been reductions that have occurred. And I think that a further reduction in staff will lead to people quitting because it will just be unsafe to be at that facility.
Yeah, and we absolutely agree with that. It does not make sense, like I said, given all the conversations that have been happening recently, why they would give such a drastic reduction to St. E's.
Yeah, all right. I'll ask some further questions about that. On community support, and this is a thing that I wish the combination of both DBH and healthcare finance would actually talk to the community about when they're making these decisions around guardrails for particular programs, is that there have been a couple of codes, et cetera, have been flagged for excessive fraud. And so I think guardrails are appropriate to ensure that we're not having the same patterns of fraud and abuse happening, but needing to have that open conversation with providers before making some of these determinations only on one side, I think would help a lot in those conversations. But I don't have any further questions for you all, but thank you so much for being here. Okay, we're going to go to our next panel. Nicole Travers, Chris Gamble. I think Betty's going to do virtual, so we'll come back to her. Gracie Obuchewicz, apologies if I said it incorrectly. Victoria Roberts. Okay, Nicole, when you're ready.
Good morning, Chairperson Henderson and members of the committee. My name is Nicole Travers, and I serve as the Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships at the DC Charter School Alliance. the local nonprofit that advocates on behalf of public charter schools to ensure every student can choose a high-quality public school that prepares them for lifelong success. Before this role, I was a Ward 7 high school principal, working directly with students, families, and school-based mental health teams. For the past 5 years, the DC Alliance has testified before this committee to advocate for equitable access to student mental health resources. As student needs continue to grow, it is critical that we strengthen, not strain, the system that supports them. We appreciate Erica Barnes, Dr. Scott, and their teams for engaging charter leaders in conversations for them to share their specific needs for their school communities. Overall, it's important to note that schools remain the primary access point for youth mental health care in this country. National data shows that 58% of public schools report increased demand for services, yet fewer than half say that they can meet those needs. Here in the district, the gap is just as clear. 40% of charter campuses lack a DBH-provided mental health professional, and the current comprehensive plan does not increase the number of providers in schools. Despite this, charter schools like DC Prep and Ingenuity Prep continue to step up, hiring additional clinicians, partnering with universities, and building strong internal support models while also leaning in on CBOs. But these efforts come with real trade-offs. School leaders are often forced to choose between hiring a mental health staff and academic interventionists. Both are essential for students to thrive, but for many schools, the UPSFF alone cannot cover them while also ensuring sufficient funds for rising fixed costs such as utilities. We recognize the district's financial constraints. However, there are practical steps we can take to ensure equity and a smoother transition to the new model. First, we understand that DBH intends to end its contracts with many CBOs to replace in-house clinicians. Sudden changes and gaps in coverage will cause major disruptions for already underserved students. We've already seen this with the transition with DC Health, where reduced health coverage has left schools with fewer supports. The SBH comp plan needs a more thoughtful, phased approach to this transition that includes retaining high-quality providers who deliver specialized support for students, including those requiring bilingual services. Second, decisions about resource allocation must be grounded in accurate data and transparency. Schools have identified inconsistencies in the environmental scan, raising concerns about how resources will be assigned. We recommend that DBH clearly share its timeline, publish its decision-making rubric, and establish an appeals process so schools can advocate for their needs. Third, we remain concerned about the telehealth model for high schools. Limiting services to after-school hours creates barriers. This current plan places the onus on families and school staff to manage scheduling, access to reliable internet, appropriate devices, and private spaces for these calls. Given this burden, we strongly recommend a hybrid model accessible during the school day. In closing, the comp plan will not meet students' needs, and the schools will be expected to fill those gaps with their formula funding at a time when the current budget proposes $96 million less to charter students, which is approximately $2,000 less per student. This will make it increasingly difficult for charter schools to continue supporting students' needs. We thank you for your time and consideration, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you. Chris?
Good morning, Chairperson Henderson and members of the Committee on Health. My name is Chris Gamble, and I'm a Behavioral Health Policy Analyst at Children's Law Center. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today about the proposed FY27 budget for the Department of Behavioral Health. Many of our clients require behavioral health services. Accessing high quality, consistent, and culturally responsive services, however, remains a persistent challenge. Last year, half of our guardian ad litem clients did not receive the services recommended for them. We're seeing increased need, but our clients struggle to access services because of wait lists, clinician turnover, and poor service provision. When this happens, youth are forced to delay addressing important health needs like processing complex trauma and healing dysfunctional family dynamics. Schools and the juvenile justice system have also been demanding these services more and more in recent years, but the proposed budget does nothing to expand access or remove barriers. Instead, there are cuts across all areas of DBH's child, adolescent, and family services. It was alarming to learn just this past Friday that CHAMPS, the district's only youth mobile crisis team, is being eliminated, and DBH plans to bring the work in-house. This information was not in the budget book due in part to an error carried over from last year's budget and had to be sought out from DBH leadership by advocates. Mobile crisis teams are not an option to debate every year. They are an essential part of the first response apparatus, and national best practice supports having specialized teams for youth. Children are at a distinct developmental stage that requires specific knowledge and skills to provide appropriate crisis intervention. CHAMPS has been providing this expertise since 2009, and there is no evidence to show that they should stop. Losing CHAMPS will cause more children to be hospitalized and will put them in harm's way as police have to respond to more crises. DBH has not presented a plan for how they will fund or staff an in-house youth mobile crisis team. The existing community response team is not an adequate backup either. In fact, additional cuts to the CRT and the Access Helpline show that crisis response is not a priority for the agency. We urge the committee to restore and raise CHAMPS funding to $1.3 million to support increased staffing, add capacity for more deployments, and decrease response times. The 988 fee legislation introduced last year would serve as an important source of additional funding to expand crisis resources. We urge the committee to continue working on passing the legislation so that our crisis response system can receive the sustained investment it deserves. In order for the money generated by the fee to be truly useful, though, DBH must understand the full scope of crisis response and how to make it effective. The choice to eliminate CHAMPS puts the district behind the rest of the country in this regard. If we continue to delay investment in the children's behavioral health system, it will only become harder to fill service gaps, and youth will keep struggling to get appropriate care, leading to prolonged behavioral health struggles throughout their lives. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I welcome any questions you have.
Thank you. Gracie?
Good morning, Chairperson Henderson and members of the council and staff. My name is Gracie Opahovich. I'm a Ward 5 resident, a DCPS parent, and the Director of Educator Wellness for Empower Ed. This is my third time testifying against DBH's proposed comprehensive school behavioral health plan. Since learning that DBH intends to remove community-based organizations, CBOs, from schools, I've been urgently worried, not just as a professional, but as a parent and a community member, about what this means for our students, our teachers, and the future of DC's school system. In my daily work with teachers across both DCPS and public charter schools, I hear the same cry for help. Since the return from COVID, student mental and behavioral health has become a relentless source of stress and demoralization for educators. They want to teach, they want to help, but they don't have the support they need to really support students. Let me give you two examples. A longtime middle school teacher told me she is terrified by the rising number of students diagnosed with behavioral issues. She loves teaching, but she feels ill-equipped to support the complex trauma these children carry into her classroom every day. As a result, she's actively looking for ways to leave the classroom. In another school with a large Hispanic population, teachers have been devastated by holding another repeated goodbye ceremonies for students whose families have chosen to self-deport. Why? Because they're afraid ICE will take them while dropping their children off at school. This is the reality of our educators and students and their families right now. What supports students, families, and teachers is culturally responsive care provided by community partners and a proven track record. Especially in this moment of fear and uncertainty for our immigrant neighbors, organizations like Mary Center and the Latin American Youth Center are delivering desperately needed support for students, situations no child should ever face. So I ask you directly, for the 90 clinicians in 88 schools being cut under this plan, how are we going to tell that child that their trusted therapist is no longer allowed to help them because yet again, DBH has failed to listen to what our community is asking for? How will we support the teacher who is already dangerously close to burnout, now expected to be both a therapist and an academic guide? And by eliminating CHAMPS, you're removing the only safe crisis safety net for our students. Therefore, I demand three things. 1, pause implementation of DBH's comprehensive plan immediately. 2, fully fund the $25.4 million to continue the CBO model of care and fully fund CHAMPS. And 3, mandate that DBH conduct a specific number of focus groups with educators before any revised plan moves forward. Teachers spend all day with students. They see exactly where the system fails them. If you don't listen to them, you will keep making the same devastating mistakes. I do not believe the DC government can solve every problem our students and families face, but we can do so much more to make our schools places where students and teachers feel physically and psychologically safe. At a bare minimum, DBH has a responsibility not to undo the incredibly impactful work CBOs are already doing, especially when the agency has presented no realistic plan to fill in the gaps it is creating. I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Victoria?
Good morning, Councilmember Henderson and members and staff of the Committee of Health. My name is Victoria Roberts. I am Vice President of Health Services and support the Emotional Wellness Department.
Sorry, Victoria, you're gonna have to lead into your mic.
Okay, thank you. And I support our Emotional Wellness Department at Community of Hope. I'm Treasurer of the Behavioral Health Association, and I'm here today to discuss the implications of the proposed FY27 budget for DBH. We are worried that DBH's current proposal to bring school-based mental health clinicians and youth crisis services under their purview will disrupt service delivery to students and negatively impact the quality of services they receive. I speak from our experience offering school-based behavioral health services at 3 sites with DBH funding: Moton and Ketchum Elementary Schools in Ward 8 and Roosevelt High School in Ward 4. All 3 sites are classified as high-need schools, and our clinicians provide on-site one-on-one counseling to students as well as other Tier 1 and 2 supports to improve school atmosphere and student achievement. As part of our engagement, we are able to provide students and families with referrals by their on-site clinician to the wide array of resources offered by Community of Hope, which includes primary medical care, dental care, psychiatry services, family counseling and resources, and SUD treatment. Community of Hope, like many other community-based partners in this endeavor, has worked hard to develop good relationships with the school's mental health teams and to understand the specific needs of each community, earning high marks from our principals. Throughout the process, DBH has been a challenging partner. All agree that there is room for improvement in the program, and with the knowledge that budgets are tight, the Behavioral Health Association led a coalition of CBOs and other thought partners to develop a workable, budget-neutral plan to ensure support for the communities, which was provided to DBH. And we continue to recommend this approach, which was also shared during the last oversight hearing. On a purely practical level, it is impossible that DBH will be able to hire the clinicians needed to prevent impact on services for the coming school year if they move forward with current plans. In addition to the proposed impacts on the SBBH program, this budget also proposes the elimination of the Child and Adolescent Mobile Psychiatric Services contract and to move it at yet one additional service under DBH. Community Hope believes that this will cause further damage to the landscape of youth behavioral services in the district. In the past, the CHAMPS program has effectively provided emergency mental health crisis response services to youth ages 6 through 17 and was cited as a program of critical importance by youth during a recent council hearing on student voices in the district. Our clinicians have relied on this program to ensure compassionate, timely, and clinically sound support for children and adolescents in crisis. We should have robust investment in these critical services and prevent destabilization of the program. In the face of growing demand for mental health services, we request that funding for school-based mental health be maintained and for the restoration of funding for CHAMPS. We have other concerns with DBH's budget, approach, and management, and these concerns are included in testimony by the Behavioral Health Association and the Strengthening Families Coalition. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you. Thank you to all those witnesses. Couple of follow-up questions. Nicole, we had conversations with DBH and they told us that they were redoing the environmental scan with schools. Have you heard about this from your member?
Thank you for that question. What we do know is that I want to say thank you just for helping to ensure that the first environmental scan data was public. We were able to review that data with our school leaders and noticed a number of inconsistencies. Since then, we have been in conversations with DBH, naming that, and there have been some conversations from what we've learned in terms of them having conversations regarding what questions they're going to ask to ensure that data is updated or finding out what new information is different from what they collected last May.
Okay. I'm a little skeptical / nervous because the whole point of the environmental scan is to determine which school needs what. So in a normal process, the environmental scan would be done prior to the budget being formulated so you can know who needs hiring, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so if the updated environmental scan hasn't happened yet, then this budget wasn't based on that.
Exactly. I agree with you. But one thing we noted in our testimonies around the appeals process, this would allow schools to be able to provide ongoing updated information as their school needs change so that it is consistently being updated so that decisions can be made based on real data and based on who they serve in their community.
Which totally makes sense to me. I mean, I know there are a lot of issues that we've had with the school nurse program in terms of DC Health, but there is a process by which a school is able to petition to the agency if a new student comes in who has some particular new health challenge or health need that needs to be addressed. DC Health can make those adjustments based on that. I'm concerned that DBH doesn't necessarily have that same model in place right now.
I agree. And this is one reason why we're seeking transparency around the model, updated clear timelines so school leaders can prepare. Many school leaders start their budgets in December, if not sooner, so that they're able to ensure adequate staffing is in place to meet the needs of their students.
Yeah, okay. All right, we'll definitely follow up on that. Mr. Gamble, don't worry. The 988 bill is technically done. We just had some strategic timing. It's moving. It's going to move. And so we're going to, so thank you for that and for the work that you all have done working with us on that. I did want to ask though, the council did a sense of the council resolution last year around crisis response. I recently did a ride along with MPD with 4D. The number of calls just in the little window that I was in the car that are mental health related and have nothing to do with crime or public safety. Even from the officer's perspective, they're like, yeah, they send us because we're the ones who are going to arrive first, et cetera. But like, if there was a strong alternative that was reliable enough that dispatch felt like, okay, they can show up, they're in the area, they can do the thing X, Y, or Z. I feel like that would be so much more transformational. The other thing that was very apparent from that experience too was around the youth piece in terms of who's calling for what particular reasons, and lots of them are mental health related as it pertains to kids. Other jurisdictions in our area, what are they doing in terms of the pediatric crisis response piece? Because I feel like when DBH is like, oh, CRT has it. And I'm like, well, how does CRT have it when CRT itself is struggling to like just meet the needs of the adults, now to add them to children?
So in Maryland, they're implementing, and I don't know exactly what stage of implementation they're at right now, but there's a model called MRSS, which is mobile response stabilization, something else with the S. But,
Okay, MRSS, we'll look that
yes,
up.
and
Okay.
it's a youth-specific crisis intervention model. I don't know exactly when it started, but it basically just shows that, that is best practice to have a team that is focused just on responding to youth, because they're at that stage where things are just different from an adult crisis, where you'll see even in the research, like sometimes things that will be called for a crisis for youth, if it were an adult, it may be overlooked as something not serious. But, just saying that your kid is not wanting to go to school in the morning and they're causing ruckus in the house, like that can be the first signal of like, okay, something serious is going on. Whereas if an adult doesn't want to go to work, we all have that day. But so even just those little slight differences for people that are doing the work day in, day out, working with youth, can pick up on those signals. Once they're on the scene, they're going to respond better to it. So yeah, Maryland is implementing that model. Virginia, off the top of my head, I can't think right now if they have a separate team for youth, but there are lots of jurisdictions in Connecticut, I want to say Rhode Island, like a lot of states where there are separate teams because of those differences.
Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah. Sorry, there's a lot to sort of unpack in all of this, and it is also so interconnected as well. So I don't have any further questions. If you all can just make sure you provide your testimony for the record. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, we're gonna go to our next panel. Dr. Magelia Cornejo? Okay. Oh, I got the last name. All right. Rodrigo Stein from La Clinica. Oh, do you? Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Okay. Well, why don't we just do that now? So, Dr. Roberts. Okay, great. Yeah. You're fine. Leah Caslas. And Devon Montgomery. Okay. I'm back. Aaron Sanchez. Gabriela Silva. All right. Okay. All right. Doctor, when you're ready, just hit the button in front of you to turn your mic on. There you go.
Okay. Good morning, Chairperson Henderson and members of the Committee on Health. I'm Dr. Miglia Cornejo, and I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Asma Hassan. We are both child and adolescent psychiatrists practicing in DC. As psychiatrists, we are physicians that specialize in evaluating and treating pediatric mental health conditions such as depression and anxiety, which are the most commonly diagnosed mental health conditions in children. We are deeply committed to preventing mental health crises among youth, and we are concerned about the potential reductions to school-based behavioral health funding. One of the most serious emergencies we treat is youth suicide, making prevention efforts especially critical. We are encouraged by DBH's commitment to suicide awareness and prevention in partnership with the School Behavioral Health Coordinating Council. Continued investment in this collaborative work is essential to strengthening the pediatric mental health system. National and local data highlight the urgency investing in prevention. Suicide rates have increased by 16% between 2008 and 2020. Mental health-related emergency room visits rose by approximately 25%. Locally, 16% of DC high school youth reported attempting suicide in the past year. And suicide remains a leading cause of death among youth, accounting for roughly 20% of youth deaths each year. From a clinical standpoint, we are identifying youth too late, particularly because many do not disclose suicidal thoughts until they are directly asked. Strengthening prevention through school-based behavioral health services allows us to identify concerns before they escalate into crises. With this reality, we strongly urge the council and mayor to maintain the $25.4 million allocation for school-based behavioral health services. Stable funding is essential to strengthen and expand effective suicide prevention efforts and would allow for DBH to build on its comprehensive school-based behavioral health expansion and align with the broader suicide prevention campaign. DC already has the framework, mandated suicide screening through the Youth Suicide Prevention and School Climate Survey Amendment Act of 2016, written guidance for developing and implementing mental health policies and procedures for schools, and access to evidence-based training programs for suicide screening. These programs include signs of suicide in middle and high schools and ask for help in elementary schools. These programs help staff recognize warning signs and respond early to connect students to mental health. Despite implementation, use of these programs vary among schools, and staff training is only required every 2 years. Maintaining the $25.4 million investment in school-based behavioral health services is critical to ensure these programs are implemented consistently, that staff are adequately trained, and schools have the resources needed to effectively prevent suicide and support students' mental health across the district. As physicians, we look forward to opportunities for collaboration with DBH and other stakeholders to ensure that every child has access to timely, high quality, and appropriate behavioral health care. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Leah.
Good morning, Chairperson Henderson and staff. The FY27 proposed budget decreases funding for school-based behavioral health by $6.1 million. The decrease to $18.5 million represents a $10 million decrease across just 3 fiscal years. In FY24, school-based behavioral health was funded at $28.2 million. In fact, every year since FY24, the funding for school-based behavioral health has decreased, despite shared positives of the existing program, as well as growing demand for school-based behavioral health. Additionally, the FY27 proposed budget increases DBH school-based behavioral health FTEs by 58, from 69.5 to 127.5 FTEs, a clear indication that DBH is continuing to move forward the comprehensive plan. DBH's current FTE increase falls 13.3 FTE short of what they originally projected for school year 26-27. More importantly, the FY27 proposed budget makes clear DBH has steamrolled right over concerns of the public, which have been clear and consistent, that this plan will only maximize disruption and minimize care for students in the district. Moreover, not every voice has been considered or heard in this plan. I have numerous instances where I'm the one breaking the news to schools, parents, and community members about DBH's plan. To allow school-based behavioral health to move fully in-house to the agency will only further the opaqueness of the program with risk of fully closing the door to public engagement. Folding on the significant progress of school-based behavioral health over the last 10 years is wrong. The district now has a workforce of 154 frontline staff of DBH and CBO clinicians serving 180 schools, thanks in part to this committee's actions last year. I have many questions of why disrupt a workforce that has taken years to build? Why disrupt 121 schools currently being served by CBOs, especially when a majority of those schools are in Ward 7 and 8? Also, what schools are undergoing these changes? It's almost May now. Why not work with schools and engage them to figure out their needs, particularly for the 74 schools without a DBH-funded resource and those who may be seeking a different DBH-funded provider? If there are this many whys, it is clear to us that this plan is not ready to move forward unless we want chaos to ensue with children and their schools being harmed in the process. This plan makes unfair comparisons between DBH and CBOs, which is unnecessary and actually misses the bigger picture. School-based behavioral health is a complex and necessary program in the district. Getting it right cannot be done by a single agency. It must be done collectively across the district. The challenges of this moment call for thoughtful innovation that strengthen relationships, recognize the unique needs of school, provide necessary flexibility, and leverage existing resources, and doesn't count them down. Ultimately, we hope all students, children, youth, and families have timely access to high-quality, responsive care. In the meantime, we ask this committee to restore funding for school-based behavioral health to $25.4 million and to move the FTEs from personnel to non-personnel. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify, and I welcome any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Gabriella.
Good morning, Chairperson Henderson and staff. My name is Gabriela Silva, and I'm the Senior Program Manager at PAVE. PAVE is also a member of the Strengthening Families Through Behavioral Health Coalition. PAVE parent leaders have been advocating for stronger school-based behavioral health support since 2018. The reason is clear. In order for students to show up as their best selves and be ready to learn, we have to take care of their mental health and well-being. Doing so requires thoughtful distribution and coordination of resources and support with everyone from teachers and school leaders to clinicians to school partners, and of course, families working together. Parents, practitioners, school leaders, educators, and youth across the district have advocated tirelessly for access to SBBH and felt its impact on students. In a 50-can State of Educational Opportunity in America report, DC ranked #1 in parent satisfaction with mental health support for the second year in a row. 62% of surveyed DC parents were very satisfied with how their schools support their child's mental health needs. This is 21% higher than the national average. Given our standing as a national leader in the school-based behavioral health space, it's important that we continue to protect the services that are already available to students as we work to equitably allocate all of our resources to expand supports where they're needed most. Today, you'll hear from PAVE parent leaders about what implementing DBH's comprehensive plan will look like for their students and school communities. I want to elevate some of their concerns and asks now. 1, restore full funding for the SBBH program. Reducing the overall allotted budget will negatively impact schools' ability to access mental health supports, and it is unclear if it would be sufficient to hire the additional DBH clinicians heading into the 2026-27 school year. 2, stabilize the high-quality supports that exist in schools. DBH's proposal to move clinicians in-house within such a short time frame risks serious and avoidable disruptions to school communities. PAVE parent leaders have been very clear about the importance of relationships. They're core to everything, and this is especially outsized for school-based behavioral health. If there are quality providers already embedded in schools, either DBH or CBO, we should avoid pulling them out entirely at all costs. Alternatively, DBH could move some clinicians with longstanding relationships in schools to part-time so they can still serve their school community and expand access across the district. 3, mitigate the impacts of DBH's timeline. The shift in timeline in DBH's proposed plan create a large gap in the ability to hire DBH clinicians before the start of the next school year. Parents are deeply concerned about the ability to hire the number of clinicians needed to fill the gaps left by CBOs in a timely manner, especially since the hiring timeline begins in October, well into the school year. Expansion must mean that current schools and schools currently without consistent on-site behavioral health support gain reliable access, even if part-time, without destabilizing care in schools that already have trusted clinicians.
4, continue to work to bolster our school-based clinician pipeline. And 5, meaningfully engage the community in planning for revised tiered service models. It is no secret that we're in a tough budget year that requires thoughtful and creative approaches to how we utilize our resources as a district. As we think about how it best serves students and families, it's crucial that we build on the work we've done, not tear it down. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I hope that we can count on your leadership.
Thank you. Dr. Roberts.
Good morning, Chairperson Henderson, council members, and staff. My name is Kenneth Roberts. I'm a doctor of behavioral health and a licensed clinician and serve as the director of behavioral health at La Clínica del Pueblo. La Clínica is a federally qualified health center providing comprehensive integrated services, including behavioral health, across the metropolitan area. Since 1983, La Clínica has been a trusted leader in advancing health equity and expanding access to care for underserved communities. We are one of the largest Spanish-speaking substance use disorder providers in the district, and many of our patients rely on us because there are few other options that meet their language and cultural needs. While we are grateful that the proposed budget did not include further reductions to Medicaid or Alliance eligibility, we remain deeply concerned about the ongoing Alliance enrollment moratorium and the growing coverage cliff facing residents between 138 and 200% of the federal poverty level. We're similarly distressed by DBH policies mirroring Alliance restrictions, even though DBH-funded services are intended to serve a broader population. This alignment risks limiting access to care beyond what was explicitly approved for the budget. More urgently, we observe a growing gap in coverage for individuals who lost or failed to maintain Alliance coverage since October of last year. Since that time, Alliance enrollment has dropped from over 21,000 to just over 16,500, a decline of nearly 25%. While coverage eligibility has changed, the need for care has not. As a result, approximately 1/3 of the services we are delivering to substance use disorder patients currently are now deemed ineligible for reimbursement. The mayor's presentation indicates that DBH will reduce substance use treatment spending by $9 million through new controls to address fraud, waste, and abuse. However, DBH's Medicaid local match shows over an $18 million increase in spending, while local-only spending appears to drop dramatically by over $8 million. These figures raise serious questions about how DBH is allocating resources and whether the proposed controls will achieve their intended goals. The consequences of untreated substance use disorder impact our entire community. Providing accessible, evidence-based treatment not only saves lives, but reduces costs. Data clearly demonstrates that patients receiving substance use disorder treatment have significantly lower medical expenditures and that investments in treatment generate substantial returns in reduced healthcare and criminal justice costs. We urge DBH and the council to ensure that DBH policies do not unnecessarily mirror Alliance restrictions, restore clarity so providers can use local dollars to serve eligible residents regardless of Alliance enrollment status, and invest in sustainable funding that reflects the true cost of delivering care. La Clínica remains committed to providing life-saving care to all who need it. We ask the council to prioritize policies that protect access to behavioral health services for all district residents. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Thank you so much to this panel of witnesses. I want to sort of follow up on a couple of things. So, Ms. Casselas, we've obviously talked to you a lot in terms of the school-based behavioral health piece, and I was just sort of referencing back with Marcia. As part of DBH's plan and their transition, there was a certain number of folks that they needed to hire in-house this fiscal year in order to sort of set them up. And I'm trying to remember because days are turning into weeks, et cetera, but I'm pretty sure they did not reach their target. And I'm trying to remember how many less it was, but
I know in February they had 3 hired, but they also had 2 vacancies from their other FTEs. So
right, separate and apart.
Exactly. So they had, I would say they had 0 hired in February. And then I think in March, we were told they had about 12 people hired. And they were supposed to have 24.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if it was half.
Yeah.
Barely.
It was about half. Yeah.
About
They're at about half. And it's March. So that would be a whole school year without clinicians.
Right. Well, and also just in general, I think, Gabriella, you might have brought this up in your testimony around, this is the trouble of our fiscal year not aligning with the school year. But the way that we handle that for DC Health or public charter schools or even DCPS is we usually front load money in the current fiscal year. And at least from what I saw, I didn't see that in the supplemental for DBH to front load so that you would have clinicians actually starting at the beginning of the school year. Because if I'm thinking about our processes in terms of government, like I said, we're not great in HR. On speed is not our strong suit. We'll post the job on October 1, maybe. We'll close the job on, let's say, November 15th, maybe. Then we're going to interview. We'll probably have you do some sort of something, then plus the references, et cetera. I can't have you come on in the middle of a pay period, XYZ. We're looking at February. If we're being honest, for this many people, it's going to take a minute. And I think that is a very reasonable concern, and one that we've raised in terms of, I'm not saying yes or no in terms of in-house versus CBO, but the idea that you could just turn off the spigot and then turn it on the next day, no one believes that that is actually what's going to happen.
And I think also you have a really robust workforce already in place. So because also what's going to happen is they're going to remove, they, are making an assumption too that they can hire from a widely available pool.
Yeah, it's always a fun. Well, people want to work for the government, do they?
Yeah, we were looking at the, it's only a part of the pool, but we were looking at the nurses transition, and we had a pool of nurses who took a training, and there was 123 nurses that had worked for Children's that took the training, and only 20 of them went on to work for DC Health. So the rest went and found other jobs. So, not that that's analogous, but it just kind of paints a picture of that it's not a one-for-one. Plus, you're cutting down a workforce that's 154 people strong right now. You'll cut 90 of them and you'll only hire back 58 of them too. And this is a really, fragile workforce. It's a unique workforce. It's not an easy to hire from pool workforce because it's people that really want to be in schools and do this work. And
yeah, that's right. People who, you're licensed. That's step one, important. You're licensed. You want to work with kids. You actually want to show up every day, because no shade to the doctors at our table. I know they show up every day for their clients, but a lot of folks in the behavioral health space are like, I can make a lot more doing telehealth and never leave my home and never accept insurance. And if I only saw adults, right? So there are so many different layers here. So we have a good group that I feel like we should hold on to, or at least try to as best we can. Although I'm not going to lie to you, trying to find this amount of money within the health cluster, there's only but so much we can do on the health in the health cluster. But I hope you guys take this argument to all of my other colleagues as well, because they got money that they can send over here. Dr. Roberts, thank you so much for being here and for the work that you all do. I know that this isn't necessarily related in terms of the DBH directly. There's definitely some healthcare finance stuff that's kind of overlapping in the work that you're seeing. But I don't know if you wanted to take a moment to speak to how things have been going with either individuals who have recently arrived and they're not able to sign up to get coverage, and what that looks like in terms of the clinic's work.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to address that. Certainly, with the specific population that we focus on, the level of fear and anxiety is a persistent challenge. And so folks who are already challenged in accessing services, when they run into these barriers, it's more often than not that they'll just say, I can't do it. right? And, you know, as an FQ, we are there to be the safety net. We're going to do whatever we can to work with them regardless of their status. But it takes a minute to actually start that engagement and build the trust that they need to actually get engaged. And when there are so many barriers to even that initial engagement, it really hurts the process.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of community support workers, does La Clinica use that option? Sorry, it's not workers. I guess it, yeah, no, I'm saying it right. Go ahead.
We do use a limited number of recovery support, but it's not one of the primary focuses in our care model.
Okay.
We're primarily outpatient treatment at regular and intensive levels.
Okay. Okay. I don't have any further questions. Thank you all so much for being here. And if you haven't uploaded your testimony for the record, please be sure to do so. Okay, next panel. Patricia Quinn from Primary Care Association. Chad Jackson. Oh, there's Chad. Dr. Kimberly Disby. I hope I'm saying that right. Is there? No. Okay. Christian Alberti from MBI. And Akila Kareem. Okay, Pat, when you're ready.
Patricia,
Sorry.
that's okay. Actually, I'm going to keep it really brief because I can't do a better job than the health centers have already done this morning, sharing their perspective on the budget. I'm Tricia Quinn. I am the policy director at the DC Primary Care Association and really came here today for two urgent priorities. One is our colleagues at La Clinica shared deep concern about the funding available for alliance beneficiaries through local dollars at DBH. We've already seen significant challenges for people on the alliance who need to access DBH services, significant reductions in ability to utilize those funds for alliance beneficiaries and those who may have lost coverage but are ineligible for Medicaid. And then second, objections to the changes around school-based behavioral health. We have a number of community health centers who've been providing those services with connections back to community-based services, that having people in the schools who are also in the community makes a huge difference for students and for their families. So we are here on both those points, asking the committee to address concerns about access to behavioral health for Alliance and school-based behavioral health. Thank you.
That was super short and sweet. Chad.
Good morning, Councilmember Henderson and esteemed members of the council. Thank you for allowing me to address you at this important hearing regarding our collective response to the opioid crisis in the District of Columbia and urgent need for strategic coordination and funding. The Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission has assembled a respected panel of experts whose guidance in substance use disorder and spending priorities is already shaping impactful interventions. Meanwhile, over the past 2 years, the Department of Behavioral Health has underspent its state opioid response, its SOAR funds, by 39%. That's $19 million left on the table. This situation presents a challenge and an opportunity to better serve our community. I recommend that the council empower the Opioid Abatement Commission to formally advise DBH on the allocation and use of SOAR funding. By aligning these two funding streams, we can strategically move eligible activities from opioid settlement grants over to SOAR programs, which we've done a little bit of already. This would free up opioid settlement dollars for investments in critical infrastructure, which is much needed in the city. such as expanding recovery centers, modernizing data systems, and strengthening our workforce. Those things can't be funded by SOAR because the money in SOAR can't be used for infrastructure. This coordination will help DBH fully leverage all available resources, ensure that no funding opportunity is missed, and maximize the positive impact on our residents. The expertise of the Commission will ensure that evidence-based practices remain at the core of our efforts while also enabling us to invest in the foundational infrastructure needed for long-term recovery and prevention. In closing, I respectfully urge the Council under your leadership to authorize Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission to advise DBH on SOAR funding and to support a strategic alignment of resources. By doing so, we can address urgent needs today and build more resilient behavior systems for the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian?
Yes, good morning.
Oh, just turn your mic on. You gotta hit the button right in front of you. There you go.
All right. Good morning, Councilwoman Henderson and members. I'm a proud employee / program manager of MBI Health Services, in which I've been with this company since 2019. I started as a school-based therapist, providing therapeutic services to students who had ADHD, ODD, PTSD, and other childhood behavioral disorders. I've conducted conflict resolution and emotional regulation groups and other forms of SEL, social emotional learning. Many students learned how to cope better, focus more in class, and improve their social skills. One student at one of our partner schools was actually considered the most misbehaved student in the school, failing all his classes, later to become most improved student with a mixture of psychotropic medication and talk therapy from MBI Health Services. Through commitment and loyalty to MBI Health Services, within 2 to 3 years, I was promoted from school-based therapist to clinical supervisor, and within another 2 to 3 years, promoted to program manager, which is the current role I serve now. What I love about MBI Health Services, which is a community-based organization, is we pride ourselves in providing person-centered, culturally responsive, and trauma-informed care for all of our consumers. I have also helped multiple clinicians obtain their clinical licenses through teaching, coaching, and support as a CBO supervisor. I have a very effective and robust management team led by Angelia Baker, current director, Dr. Marie Black, former CEO, and current CEO, Ms. Rhonda Barnes. Many school administrators have expressed great gratitude and appreciation for MBI Health Services, CBO, due to our ability to effectively serve youth from the inner city, traumatic and other unstable backgrounds. We kindly ask and strongly ask for continuation of CBO partnership and inclusion on behalf of MBI Health Services. Thank you.
Thank you. Akila?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Councilperson Henderson and members. My name is Akila Karyam, and my message is not statistical, but straight from the heart about the work that we do at MBI. I have been a school-based therapist for MBI since 2019, and I would like to share with you some of the experiences of working with this agency, CBO, that I feel has had a positive impact on the students and families that we serve and the community as a whole in Wards 7 and 8. What we bring to the table is community-based organization, school-based therapists. I view my work as a school-based therapist of a CBO as having a positive impact on our students because I bring lifelong experiences with wisdom and academic achievement, as well as a personal touch of caring for humanity and dignity for our school-based students in Wards 7 and 8, where I work. Benefits of good mental health for students. I'm a former teacher, and I understand the impact that good mental health has on children for learning, feeling safe, and being able to continue dreaming of reaching their life's goals. I understand why it is important for families to achieve good mental health for raising responsible, happy children who can contribute to society in a positive way. As a former educator, I also understand the needs of the staff I work with in the schools. Improving the quality of lives for the students we serve. I often collaborate with my school-based colleagues to share updated information and new techniques in the mental health field for treating our consumers with the latest mental health technology. Each morning, I review all of these things in my mind as I drink my coffee and plan my day of how I can make a difference in the community by assisting our students with improving quality of their lives through good mental health. Being a mental health professional is a most rewarding career because sometimes you can see the impact that you have had on a consumer when there is a shift in a consumer and hope re-emerges. It is as if the sun has come back out after a storm. It is at these moments you can realize why you do this work. CBO school-based therapists make all of these things possible. Working for MBI, a school-based organization, allows me and my colleagues to have a positive impact on the students in the schools that we serve through healing and creating a healthy community where they can thrive, which is the reward for doing what we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to this panel of witnesses. So it's sort of a little bit of the difficulty of coming in so late in the process is that a lot of the questions I would have had have been answered. Ms. Green and Mr. Alberti, though, it's good to hear about your experiences working in the schools and the impact that the CBOs, well, your organization and the work that you've been doing has impacted young people across the city. So we'll certainly be asking DBH some questions about the school-based behavioral health program writ large. Mr. Jackson obviously will be asking some questions around the substance use disorder pieces and wanting to make sure that the district has made some great progress in the last 3 years in particular. And we want to make sure that we're able to continue to build on some of that work and make sure that we have the structures in place. One of the things that even this year with the changing federal administration, I have an uncomfortability with so much of our substance use work relying on federal funding. Because once you get a person who no longer decides he likes harm reduction in the secretary's seat, then all of a sudden our whole infrastructure and our programs sort of fall apart. And we saw that happen a little bit earlier this fiscal year when it came to some of our needle exchange programs and who could even purchase needles and does that fit the definition? And there's just a lot I feel like we need to do on the local side for more sustainability on some of this work. So appreciate you being a part of that and advocating. And then Ms. Quinn, I'm sure I'll see you again for some of the other upcoming agencies as well, but we'll certainly be asking some questions about Alliance and that type of stuff. Yes.
Yeah, we're starting to look at data. It's preliminary, really just the last 6 months, and you don't really have a full picture of what's happened within the system until the end of the year when you can do the look back.
Yeah.
But I will say we are seeing significant drops in Alliance visits. We're going to try to do an analysis by visit type, but I would not be shocked to know that in the behavioral health space, we may have seen the most significant decline just because the resources have been so limited, local dollar resources for SUD particularly, for Alliance. So we hope to be able to share more in the DHCF hearing.
Okay, great. Well, then I'll look forward to that. Yeah, we'll look forward to, yes, Chad.
One of the things that I worry about, and I share your concerns, this underspend that we have in SOAR, we've always had an underspend. We've never really spent all of that SOAR money.
Yeah.
But I think what you're talking about with this new administration, who is very unsatisfied with the work that SAMHSA has done. SAMHSA has actually played around with the rules. The law the legislation as written says that all underspend goes back to the general fund in the federal government, just like every other grant program in the federal government for HUD or all those places. The law says it all goes back. That $19 million would be gone. But SAMHSA over the years has played with that because we were in the middle of an opioid crisis. I think the expectation that next year the Trump administration is not going to catch up and leave that money on the table if we underspend it is kind of hubris on our part.
Well, my response then to the administration would be the opioid crisis is not over. Just because people are, they're not fatal overdoses, the number of non-fatal overdoses is still incredibly high.
In fact, we're developing a population who has a sickness and they aren't dying from it. And so we have more urgent care to take care of in this population. It's just not overdose deaths. It's actual people who are surviving these things, and we need to really care for them.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Okay. Balaji, excuse me, Kalamarthi. Okay. I'm sorry. I tried. Grace Ordick. There, Grace? No. Okay. Carolyn Greenspan. All right. Is there anybody who? Oh. Okay. Come on, Mark. Come on down. All right. Is there anybody else who you thought you were virtual or you thought you were in person, but we have you on virtual or I haven't called you yet? I have one more seat. This is your time. This is your moment. Okay. All right. All right. Mr. Kalamarthi.
Good morning, Chairperson Henderson and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Siva Balaji Kaliyamurthy, and I'm a psychiatrist and director of the addiction program at Children's National Hospital. For over 150 years, Children's National has been an integral part of the healthcare safety net, serving children and families in Washington, D.C. metropolitan region. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on the fiscal year 2027 budget of the Department of Behavioral Health. Children's National is proud to partner with DBH to expand access to substance use disorder services for children and adolescents across the district with an opioid strategic grant program. The funding has been allocated through the Opioid Abatement Report Fund, and this grant has allowed Children's National to expand prevention, treatment, and recovery services for young people. These investments are already making a difference by improving access to care and supporting youth and families grappling with the negative impact of substance use. Since receiving the grant, we have been able to grow and deliver care to an increasing number of patients, serving 90 individuals and actively treating 70 currently. The funding from DBH has also supported the hiring of a pediatrician who's also board certified in addiction medicine, a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and 2 peer recovery support specialists who serve as peer coaches. This has enabled our clinics to expand operations from 3 to 5 days per week. In addition, we have increased our reach and helped reduce distance-based barriers to care for youth by opening clinics at our locations at the ARC and Shaw. Our efforts are also addressing increased cannabis use by our youth, where we are finding that increased access in the community does not match an understanding of the harm caused. Our work at the ARC has particularly been meaningful, and the ability to provide services in this community-anchored setting has allowed us to build trusting relationships with young people who might otherwise struggle to access care. In fact, many young patients are relieved when they're looking for treatment to know that they can come to the ARC, a place they know and trust, since many of our young patients go there for their pediatrician's visits. We need continued support for our services and believe the OR funds should still be allocated for this work. Due to this fact, we are concerned about the potential reductions to the OAR fund proposed in the budget and the impact it could have on future grant funding opportunities. Losing funding for this program would be detrimental to our progress in treating addiction in our adolescents. We would lose our 2 peer recovery specialists who are responsible for outreach in the community, including at the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, and they help facilitate entry into treatment and maintenance of care. Even after our patients leave DYRS, our peer recovery specialists stay in touch with them to ensure they continue to receive the care they need. Not only would we have to reduce staff, but we would also have to reduce access across our current sites if this grant's not renewed. While we are encouraged by the progress we have made in SUD, we recognize that there is more work to be done to strengthen the full continuum of care for children and adolescents. As was noted by a fellow colleague of mine, children make up about 22% of the population, but 100% of our future. We recognize that today's fiscal landscape would require difficult decisions. However, Children's National urges the Council to protect behavioral health services in the face of difficult budgetary decisions. Ensuring a full continuum of care is essential, preventing serious mental health conditions where possible, and protecting children from serious escalation of crisis when they occur. Children's National remains a committed partner with the Council and DBH in building a coordinated, responsive behavioral health system for district youth. Be happy to answer any questions you or the committee may have.
Thank you. All right, Carolyn.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Greenspan, and I'm the Director of School-Based Mental Health at Mary Center, where we have 22 school partnerships through the DBH-funded program. I am here today to express serious concerns about DBH's current direction for school-based behavioral health services. Instead of working with providers and school partners to refine and strengthen the existing program, DBH is proposing to discard the work that has been built and start over. This approach fails to recognize the value of existing partnerships and the infrastructure already in place. Mary Center is not just a provider. We are an asset to the system. We offer extensive wraparound services that go beyond what DBH alone can provide, supporting students and families holistically. We consistently receive strong positive feedback from our partner school principals regarding the quality and impact of our services. I have compiled letters of support from school partners stating that they are satisfied with our services and want us to remain their provider. We therefore are deeply concerned about the impact on schools and students. The proposed changes risk stripping schools of critical behavioral health services for unknown periods of time. DBH is moving forward with this plan without meaningfully incorporating feedback, developing viable alternatives, or demonstrating that it has the capacity to implement a new model effectively. DBH's decision to move forward in isolation reflects a broader pattern. We have similar concerns that meaningful continuous quality improvement, or CQI, has not been implemented over the past few years, despite clear recommendations outlined in DBH's March 2024 report by Child Trends regarding development of a CQI system for the school behavioral health program. Rather than receiving structured feedback through ongoing CQI processes, Mary Center and other CBOs learned of DBH's concerns about our work through the comprehensive plan in October 2025. It is unclear why these concerns were not communicated earlier through a good faith effort to strengthen this important program. Instead of following the recommendations in its own report, DBH is now proposing to dismantle the program entirely and begin again. This raises concerns that the necessary work of engaging partners, addressing challenges, and improving implementation is being avoided rather than carried out collaboratively. In addition, the non-billable grant requirements do not reflect the realities of school environments. These metrics appear to have been created by DBH without sufficient input from schools or providers and do not provide enough flexibility for schools to meaningfully shape how resources are utilized. DBH does not appear to have gone back to schools to assess how these metrics are working in practice. Again, a feedback loop necessary for continuous quality improvement is missing. We urge the Council to ensure that any changes to the system are grounded in collaboration, transparency, and a clear plan to maintain and strengthen services for students. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Mark?
Chairperson Henderson, members of the Council, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Mark Lavoda. I'm the Executive Director of the District of Columbia Behavioral Health Association and a Ward 2 homeowner. The District of Columbia Behavioral Health Association works to advance high-quality whole person care for district residents with mental illnesses, substance use disorders, or both, including the 35,000 district residents our 35-member organizations serve annually. The Mayor's proposed FY27 budget for the Department of Behavioral Health raises serious concern about the adequacy of district behavioral health resources. My testimony will focus on unnecessary, widespread disruption of school behavioral health services, effective elimination of children's mobile crisis services, and reduced funding availability for home and community-based rehabilitative behavioral health services. The mayor's proposed budget advances a seriously flawed and deeply disruptive approach to school behavioral health. CBOs expect to lose funding for approximately 90 clinicians, and DBH has announced plans to move forward with substitution of 59 in-house FTEs, not all clinicians. The budget book shows only $18.5 million has been made available for school behavioral health, a $6.1 million cut from this year. Both the plan proposed and the amount allocated to implement the plan are insufficient and unacceptable. The council should restore Children's Mobile Crisis Service funding to the FY24 spending level. Reduction of CHAMP's funding over the past several years has forced elimination of multiple teams, leading to higher numbers of calls with no teams available to deploy to respond to a children's crisis. Elimination of the entire CHAMP's contract is not an appropriate response to disappointment with the predictable consequences of years of underfunding. The mayor's proposed budget offers neither the financial resources nor the assurance of an effective alternative. The council should also be concerned about spending patterns for DBH rehabilitative services. Despite announced introduction of new substance use controls, DBH's Medicaid local match shows an estimated $18.9 million in additional spending, which seems to indicate that DBH still lacks an effective plan to significantly reduce fraud, waste, and abuse across the program. DBH also appears prepared to eliminate community support and outpatient recovery support services from the local dollars for people who are not eligible for Medicaid. This fights fraud by eliminating benefits for people who need care, rather than improving provider network management and assuring appropriate clinical criteria and authorization reviews. This abdication is deeply disappointing, and the council should consider alternatives. While I'm unprepared to offer significant recommendations for direction for resolution, I also note with concern the $14 million reduction and 16.5 net FTE reduction at St. Elizabeth's, approximately flat funding for DBH housing services despite multiple CRF closures and inadequate voucher amounts, and the always expected but still unsatisfactory trajectory of opioid settlement fund spend down. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Thank you. Thanks to this panel of witnesses. Dr. Killamurthy, I wanted to ask, just for clarification, which grant did you all receive for the work that helped to do the expansion with the staff, the peer recovery, and
That's through the Opioid Abatement Recovery Grant Program.
okay.
It's the abatement funds.
How much was it?
So it's been on a yearly basis. We get approximately anywhere between $380,000 to $420,000 a year.
Okay. And you guys received it for this fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay. But are concerned about not receiving it in the future?
Yes, or reduction in the budgeted amount.
Okay. Okay. Ms. Greenspan, when's the last time that you've talked to someone at DBH about their transition plans on school-based behavioral health?
We have received some updates in meetings that we've been in, like an executives meeting and the supervisors meeting. They recently released the criteria for CBOs.
What do you mean criteria? Like
The criteria for who would be, how they would choose CBOs for next year.
okay. Were you satisfied with that, or do you have some thoughts, concerns on that piece? We haven't seen that.
Okay, yeah, I think they weighted, I have questions about how they weighted certain things, like there's one point for if you work for special populations, which is equal to if you are submitting a report, a staffing report every week. So things like that, which
Wait.
I think maybe special
Time out.
populations.
Everybody would have to submit a staffing report. Special population, like some of your clinicians who are multilingual.
Mhm. Yeah, so we think that should have more emphasis.
Correct.
Than some of the other things on there.
Okay. Did they tell you all what their timeline was, though? I mean, from a hiring perspective, you're the director of the school-based program for Mary Center. It's, I'm just gonna say, it's like, we're basically at the end of the school year.
Yeah, yeah, we are very concerned about that. It's caused a lot of stress for our clinicians who don't know, the status of their roles.
Okay. Okay. We'll follow up there. Mark, thanks for being here. Good to see you in person. But there were a variety of issues that you brought up, whether it be school-based, the MHRS cuts, St. Elizabeth. So there is a lot for us to sort of focus on there that we'll get into with DBH on Friday. Is there anything that hasn't come up today that you want to make sure that we don't miss in our conversation with the government witnesses on Friday?
Well, I think one of the things that I didn't include in my testimony today, because we'll talk about it more in the DHCF hearing, is just how the local dollar cuts align with the changes to the Alliance program and the basic health plan. I'm concerned that we're going to be creating a different local dollar benefit for behavioral health services than we have in either Medicaid or the basic health plan.
Okay.
And that effective need to administer 3 different programs with overlapping eligibility requirements is going to be really confusing for beneficiaries, and also means that people may start to try to game the system a little bit of like, oh, I want to be an Alliance beneficiary because now it covers more than the basic health plan. So how do I do that? Even though the basic health plan, of course, is 100% federally funded and Alliance is 100% local funded. So it just seems to me like there also was not the coordination that we would have wanted between DBH and DHCF, as well as HBX, about how they're trying to use local dollar services.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. And if you haven't provided your testimony for the record, please go ahead and upload that. Thank you. All right, we're going to go to our virtual witnesses. And as I said earlier, although that was almost 2 hours ago, so some of you may not have been listening at that point, but for those who are joining us virtually for the first time, you'll need to affirmatively accept our invitation to become a panelist. There'll be a little box that pops up on your screen to ask whether or not you want to be promoted, and you do need to say yes. We're going to do panels of let's try 6 and see where we go. Okay. Betty Gentile, Hillary Kaser, Miriam Hauser, Nadia Casey, oh. He was number 17. Oh, okay. Sure. Yeah. Devon Montgomery. And Scott Goldstein, which would be 6. Okay. All right, Betty, when you're ready.
Greetings, Chairperson Henderson and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Betty Gentile, and I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy and Public Policy at Sum Incorporated, a DBA certified provider. Since 1970, Sum has worked to break cycles of poverty, homelessness, and hunger through a whole person approach. We provide trauma-informed, equity-centered healthcare, including services for mental health stability and substance use treatment for sustained recovery. We serve residents with behavioral health needs, both in crisis, experiencing homelessness, and those working to maintain stability while housed. 2 gaps are clear: access to safe and affordable housing and coordinated care. While these gaps persist, people cycle through crisis and the system pays for it. Investing in both leads to better outcomes and smarter use of public dollars. Sum is an active member of the DCBHA, the ATRC, and the Fair Budget Coalition, all collectively calling for a public health budget firmly grounded in equity, sustained investment, and a commitment to compassionate, person-centered care. First, we are concerned by what appears to be a near elimination of local funds only funding. While DBH may be shifting or restructuring these resources, details remain unclear. We urge the committee to seek clarity and ensure the funding structure meets the needs of residents and providers. As some, our staff works diligently to enroll all Medicaid-eligible individuals. Still, we have seen a recent increase in local dollar billing for those newly uninsured, while delays in reimbursements persist. We are still awaiting local fund payments from FY24 and FY25, though we appreciate DBH's collaboration in arriving at a resolution. Second, we are concerned that this budget does not adequately support crisis response. The reduction to community response teams raises questions about access, especially when residents in crisis are still too often met by law enforcement rather than behavioral health professionals. We are equally concerned about CHAMPS funding. Reducing crisis response for youth will make our city less safe for young people experiencing mental health challenges. This is preventable harm. We urge restoring funding to $1.3 million. We also support restoring school-based behavioral health services to $25.4 million and preserving the existing workforce, community-based providers, and DBH staff supporting students across DC schools. As resources tighten, efficient use of funds is critical. DBH must ensure timely disbursement of grants and payments. Delays disrupt care, strain staffing, and limit providers' ability to operate sustainably. We hope that reduction to behavioral health grant oversight services do not reflect a loss of capacity or staff. We are grateful for SOAR Recovery Housing and Opioid Abatement Funding supporting our transitional housing program. Housing is healthcare, and these investments should be treated as permanent recurring commitments rather than limited time funding. We also appreciate opioid outreach pilot funding, connect the residents to care, and strongly support its permanence through the Place-Based Substance Use Disorder Outreach Amendment Act of 2025. In closing, a weak behavioral health budget does not reduce need, it shifts it. When services are underfunded, residents experience deeper instability and other systems are forced to absorb the impact at a higher cost. A strong behavioral health system is foundational to a healthy and stable district. Now more than ever, we must work together to protect and expand access to care. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Hillary?
Thank you to the committee, staff, and to you, Chair Henderson. A happy belated Emancipation Day wishes. Council Member Henderson, you amazingly got DBH Director Dr. Basram to say that DBH need to do something about hoarding disorder HD. Easily dismissed as not serious, HD is in fact a matter of life and death. A person with hoarding disorder in an apartment with so many possessions that are blocking the ventilation system can cause carbon monoxide to build up in other units, making tenants get sick or even die. DC FEMS know only too well both the human cost and the dollar cost of untreated hoarding disorder. The serious community-wide public health problem of hoarding disorder affects all of us. DBH must take the lead role in coordinating an interagency approach. At the moment, DBH do nothing for HD, but refer consumers out to APS. APS, like FEMS, are not providers of behavioral health care. If you could put a very small allocation in this budget now, it would save DC taxpayer money overall. FEMS spending on fire because of hoarding disorder, APS spending on once-in-a-lifetime heavy-duty cleanouts, all that could be avoided by early intervention and harm reduction. APS placed district residents with severe HD under guardianship, which we've heard this morning is not a good plan. APS also placed those district residents into long-term nursing care for no reason other than that the person's hoarding disorder has gone undiagnosed and untreated for a lifetime. What a waste of precious DC Medicaid dollars to house a person in long-term nursing when they could have had early intervention and harm reduction, and it's also a health equity issue. People with resources do not have this happen to them, only our community members with the least resources. Gaithersburg, Maryland, Hoarding Code Violation Assistance Program, Fairfax, Virginia, Hoarding Task Force. I have no personal investment in what gets done, only that DC must do something. We have a DC therapist who specializes in hoarding disorder, Liza Tchaikovsky, LICSW, 202-768-7464, provides hoarding assistance, not currently taking new HD program patients. They have a pilot program they could run for $10,000. It's worth it. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Founded to address critical gaps in care in our community, DC Care Collaborative helps prevent crises that can lead to premature institutionalization. They focus on hoarding disorder, an often under-recognized issue that can threaten health, safety, and housing stability. Using social work expertise, they provide compassionate, non-judgmental interventions that help clients improve living conditions safely, preserve dignity and autonomy, strengthen stability, reduce risk, and improve overall quality of life. If awarded $10,000, DC Care Collaborative would expand access to critical decluttering and hoarding intervention services for low-income seniors at risk of eviction, particularly those who are underserved, homebound, or experience barriers to traditional care. Such a pilot program would serve approximately 3 individuals facing urgent housing instability, including those who have received cure or quit notices. I welcome any questions and am really grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Nadia? Okay, I don't see Nadia. Devon?
Good morning, Chairperson Henderson. My name is Devon Montgomery, and I'm an educator leader in Ward 5, an Empower Ed Fellow, and a member of the Fair Budget Coalition. As an elementary educator in the district over the past 16 years, I have been on the front lines of working with the youngest scholars and families. I'm here today to ask the council to preserve the wellness, safety, and well-being of our scholars by fully funding mental health services and resources within schools. I've been in many situations where scholars ranging from 5 to 10 have been experiencing behavioral mental health crises that our school staff have not been equipped with the ability to support, and I've had to utilize CHAMPS. In years when CHAMPS was funded and had the capacity for quick response times, I saw them support scholars and families in amazing ways. Recently, members of our support team have called CHAMPS, and I've been advised to call 911 and involve law enforcement to support a scholar in mental health crisis because they could not dispatch anyone to our school until 9 p.m. when a scholar was in crisis at 9 a.m. As a result, officers were dispatched to our school to support the scholar. This is unacceptable. I or any other school staff members should not have to field questions from elementary scholars surrounding the fear that their classmate is being arrested because they need the support. Elementary scholars should not have to fear that their classmate is being arrested because they are in need of mental health support. Children are put in danger if CHAMPS is replaced with a general adult crisis team that lacks adequate pediatric training. Currently, there is nowhere suitable to take a young person experiencing a severe crisis. Investment must increase, not decrease. CHAMPS has been offering youth services for the past 17 years, and the district's continuum of care would lose expertise if they're replaced by CRT or another team. This committee needs to restore the cuts from SBBH funding so that it's minimally funded at the same level as it was in fiscal year in this year. It's $25.4 million. Our school student support team also has been unable to consistently get a school clinician through our CBO partnership. The Committee on Health needs to, DBH leadership also claims that CHAMPS, their contract is being completely eliminated for the next year with plans of bringing that in-house. This program is crucial to safely providing services for our scholars and families and should not be eliminated. I urge the council to support not moving the program in-house, restore the contract to $1.2 million, and support better implementation of crisis response to ensure that children are reached quickly during a time of crisis. Thank you for your time and consideration of my testimony. Please review my testimony for further elaborations.
Thank you. Miriam?
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share testimony. My name is Miriam Hauser, and I am the Vice President of Behavioral Health at Mary Center. We are a core service agency and have providers in 22 DC public and charter schools. I'm speaking today to ask you to preserve funding for CBOs for school-based behavioral health, restore school-based behavioral health funding to $25.4 million, and not approve DBH's addition of 58 FTEs to provide these services instead. You have heard extensively about the concerns from the community over the comprehensive plan and how the presence of CBOs adds value. Though DBH has ostensibly made opportunities for feedback available, they have not indicated how they have incorporated this feedback. DBH has remained intractable despite the nearly universally negative response to their plan. Does DBH view feedback and oversight hearings simply as boxes to check? During the oversight hearing on February 2nd, DBH touted that for the first time, over 70% of schools are staffed with a behavioral health clinician, without acknowledging that their plan will remove most of them.
Therapists are not interchangeable. It can take months of building trust through interactions in the hallway and cafeterias before a child is open to stepping into the office for an initial session. The DBH has said that schools will still receive services with DBH clinicians and have added FTE to the budget line. There's a significant risk that not all these positions will be filled for the start of the school year. DBH has expressed confidence in its hiring plans, but they have also missed every self-imposed deadline they have set, starting with the late release of the comprehensive plan. DBH has indicated it will select between 3 to 4 high-performing CBOs to remain for 1 year only before bringing services fully in-house in FY 2028. They released the criteria for choosing these CBOs 1 month later than the date given to the council during oversight. Though Dr. Bazaran has directly told schools that they will maintain partnerships with CBOs that serve special populations, the criteria indicate that this instead will only be a single point in a larger scorecard. When asked at its meeting with CBO executives last week, DBH was unable to say how many schools would have either a CBO or DBH clinician next year, stating that it would depend on which CBOs were selected. They also stated that they have not yet assessed which schools will fall under which model, a single clinician, a shared clinician, a cluster model, or telehealth, and do not plan to start having these conversations about need until after FY27 CBOs are selected in mid-May at the earliest. If the council decides to reallocate funds in the Budget Act to have CBOs remain in schools, I urge you to let DBH know of this intent as soon as possible, as DBH has stated that it will begin notifying schools and CBOs about the loss of their partnerships in mid-May before the budget receives final approval. Thank you.
Thank you. And Scott Goldstein.
Good morning. In a time where so much trauma has been inflicted upon our community and the need for school-based behavioral health and other mental health and well-being support is so high, the Department of Behavioral Health is proposing a massive shift away from the CBO model that will dramatically undercut the well-being of DC students and families. You'll hear a lot about the disruptions this will cause. CBOs cutting service, removing 90 clinicians from 88 schools that are not prepared to replace them under the proposed timeline. But beyond the immediate damage, I want to talk about why the CBO model works. When CBOs partner with schools for school-based behavioral health, they do much more. They bring the full knowledge they gain from their embedded work in their community. They bring the resources they have as organizations beyond clinicians, and they bring helpful independence from the school that ensures that 1, they are not co-opted in other duties by school leaders or the agency, but held accountable specifically to the behavioral health goals they are contracted for. 2, they are loyal to their school partners and go above and beyond their mandate by lending organizational resources to needs as they pop up. 3, they are much more likely to support both students and adults in the building because they are not structurally limited from doing so by the school or the agency. To be blunt, this plan will also deeply hurt incredible CBOs whose economic health is important for our communities in so many other ways. I fear that this action will also cause real damage to the work to address chronic absenteeism in the district, as we lose enormous institutional memory and best practices that these CBOs have developed. Moving everyone in-house with this transition and training needed to do that well as the recruitment challenges, is not a 2-year arc. Making this change, even as DBH admits the noted increase in suicidal ideation in the district at a time when immigrant students and families are under attack, when Black youth are facing constant over-policing in the community, both locally and federally, and DBH has not even completed their 26-27 environmental scan, is deeply irresponsible. Apparently, DBH is taking the same approach to the Lifeline CHAMPS program. CHAMPS has 17 years of experience, the institutional knowledge of providing mobile mental health support to youth, and has been chronically underfunded. At a time when need is so high, it is again deeply troubling to immediately bring in-house programs DBH has proven it is not prepared to handle. It is not an exaggeration to say that young people will be harmed and could die as a result of this careless approach. Youth are in crisis, and this budget piles on. We demand that DBH pause implementation of their comprehensive plan and ensure $25.4 million in full funding for the CBO model of care and full funding for CHAMPS. Finally, the DBH proposal fails to invest in non-clinical support for the well-being of students and staff. With the continued pipeline challenges, we absolutely must invest in non-clinical approaches as well to clinical providers in schools. DBH should be sponsoring school wellness coordinators to support both student and staff well-being, as has been so effective in the schools and LEAs that have implemented this approach. And they need to be listening to educator voices as they hopefully rewrite the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to this panel of witnesses. A couple of follow-up questions. Miriam, it sounds like you have some updated information in terms of, I think this is the first I heard of, the CBOs will be selected mid-May. which again, into the school year, so that doesn't help in terms of the scheduling and planning. But also from the perspective of DBH and their own hiring on the other side, you would need to know how many CBOs are coming on board before you would know how many clinicians you need to hire to backfill, correct?
So it was a little alarming to hear them say that they did not know which schools would have clinicians or how many CBO clinicians would be picked. And even though they've said mid-May, I'm not sure that I feel fully confident that they will meet that deadline.
Okay. Do you happen to know when the second environmental scan will be complete?
No, I had not even heard before today that there was a second environmental scan. That's not something they had shared in our school-based executive meetings.
Okay. All right. This is helpful for us to follow up with them on that stuff. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Montgomery, Mr. Goldstein, you guys testified about similar stuff in terms of the program, but also about CHAMPS. And so just note that you've been heard and we share some of your concerns around the continued sort of push off of pediatric to dealing with the CRT team that is not necessarily equipped to deal with children. They can, but it's not a specialty of the folks who are in that group. So we'll certainly ask some follow-up questions there. And then Ms. Kaser, thank you so much for being here and your continued advocacy around hoarding disorder. And I think you're absolutely right. It's a disorder. It's certainly not something that FIMS is designed to deal with. This is something that's going to require ongoing attention. And I was just telling Marcia, we need to put this on the list as well as gambling as well. Different, and yet still two disorders where it can have devastating impact on people's lives and yet doesn't, I feel like, get the attention needed from the department as a real issue.
Thank
I don't know if
you.
Okay. I don't have any further questions for you all at this stage, but thank you so much for being here. And if you could provide your written testimony for the record, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna go to the next panel. Clark Hagan, Elizabeth Davis, Will Doyle, Laura Maestas, Natalie Smith, and Lavanya Dofat Avent. Oh, okay, and Bria Mathis as well. So this panel will be 7. Again, there'll be a little box that pops up that says, I'd like to be a panelist. All right, I do see Clark. So Clark, when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson and members of the committee. Thank you for providing me some time today. My name is Dr. Clark Hagan. My doctorate is in public health policy, and that's the field I work in. In my work life, I build coalitions and know firsthand how successful and effective the partnerships between the public sector and community-based organizations are. However, today I'm speaking in my personal capacity as a parent of an autistic child in a Ward 5 public school who's at risk of losing essential services with inaction of this budget. My wife and I have 2 sons in DCPS at Burroughs Elementary School. They're age 7 and 5. My 7-year-old is autistic, and as part of his 504 plan, he has access to a school social worker as needed, contracted through April-May. This service has been invaluable to him and us. It has tremendously helped his social skills, self-esteem, and been there to help in tough situations. His social worker has been available to him year-round, and she has gone above and beyond to help him and my family. My rambunctious 5-year-old was looking forward to general check-ins with her when he becomes eligible in kindergarten. My wife and I check in with the provider regularly. She informed us that her organization is pulling out of school to get ahead of the planned terminations. The services that my son gets that are essential to his well-being are now at risk. We have noticed a tremendous improvement in his school behavior, his home behavior, and our provider has been his go-to safe person when he has episodes that veer on violence. This cannot be easily replaced. My son doesn't qualify for an aide or any dedicated support staff. These individuals are reserved for those with IEPs or intense school-related behavioral needs. Without the social worker, he's subjected to a provider that, based on this proposed budget, might not even be assigned to a school, will have a caseload that would now not allow the sufficient time for my son to obtain meaningful services that he needs to function at his potential. I thank you again for your time and consideration. I'm happy to provide more information and feedback. Thank you again.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Good morning, Chair Henderson. Good morning, Chair Henderson and members of the committee. My name is Elizabeth Davis, and I'm the Senior Director of Government Relations for the District of Columbia Hospital Association. I appreciate the opportunity to present testimony at the Department of Behavioral Health's FY27 Budget Oversight hearing. As you are aware, DCHA is the unifying voice of the district's hospitals and represents the interests of our members who provide care to residents from all 8 wards, our neighbors in Maryland and Virginia, and patients from around the world. In this challenging budget environment, it is critical that the Department of Behavioral Health's budget sustains and strengthens investments that improve the behavioral health of our residents. This includes ensuring that residents receive care in the most appropriate setting through schools, crisis response, residential treatment, and supportive housing. While we appreciate that DBH's proposed FY27 budget provides an enhancement of $13 million in Adult Services Administration to support Medicaid costs for mental health rehabilitation services program, we remain concerned about the overall reductions in local funding for crisis response services, St. Elizabeth's Hospital, and school-based behavioral health. We believe that continued support at St. Elizabeth's Hospital is critical to maintaining system stability and ensuring that individuals with the highest level of acuity receive the appropriate care they need. We are supportive of the $6.8 million enhancement for overtime noted in Table 5. However, we are concerned about the other substantial reductions elsewhere in the hospital's proposed budget, including the reduction in clinical and medical services. We urge the committee to carefully examine the potential impact of the reductions when investments are critical. Reductions could lead to increased pressure on emergency departments, community-based providers, and other parts of the care continuum. We are also concerned about the loss of FTEs associated with the opioid abatement program. We recognize that reductions in this area may limit the district's ability to fully implement and oversee critical prevention through the Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission. Our hospitals continue to partner with the department to address ongoing opioid crisis through the implementation of prevention and SUD screening initiatives and treatment programs. DCHA remains committed to collaborating with the department to ensure that residents have access to high-quality healthcare services, and we look forward to continuing to support Dr. Basron and her team in improving behavioral health access. Thank you for allowing me to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Will?
Thank you, Chair Henderson and Council staff. My name is Will Doyle, and I'm the Vice President of Housing First at Pathways to Housing DC. I want to focus my comments on the urgent care clinic, which is funded in the FY27 budget. Thank you, Chair Henderson, for your work and the work of your staff. This crucially needed service would not be funded and would not even exist right now without your support over the last few years. The Court Urgent Care Clinic is unique as staff provides same-day mental health and substance use assessment and treatment at the DC Superior Court. The Court Urgent Care Clinic is required to minimally serve 600 unique referrals annually. The clinic had 697 unique referrals, 821 assessments, and 4,157 follow-up visits in FY24. These numbers increased to 897 unique referrals, 1,078 assessments, and 5,747 follow-up visits in FY25. The clinic is on pace for 1,196 unique referrals, 1,450 assessments, and 6,542 follow-up visits in FY26. Demand is on pace to be 72% higher this year than in FY24 and to exceed the contract expectation by 99%. In FY24, the clinic served 80 to 95 clients through ongoing services. In FY25, the clinic served 115 to 145 clients through ongoing services. In FY26, the clinic has served 175 to 200 clients through ongoing services. From FY24 to the present, clients therefore increased by 114%. As the demand for the clinic services continue to grow, more permanent and increased funding is needed. We ask for your continued support as we work with DBH to ensure adequate and stable funding into the future. Regarding additional input on the FY27 budget, Pathways to Housing DC fully endorses the budget recommendations of the DC Behavioral Health Association as presented in Mark Lavota's oral and written testimony. Thank you for all your efforts. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Will. Laura? There she is.
Hi, sorry, just trying to find the right screen. Good morning, Chairperson Henderson and members of the committee. My name is Laura Maestas, and I'm the CEO of DC Prep. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. At DC Prep, we serve students who bring real mental health needs into our classrooms every day. We are grateful for the district's commitment to school-based behavioral health services and for the partnership with the Department of Behavioral Health. But today I want to share appreciation and concern about whether the current model is meeting students' needs. Across DC, gaps in coverage and continuity remain significant. At DC Prep, all 6 of our campuses are eligible for a DBH-funded clinician. Yet today, we effectively have 3 clinicians serving 6 schools. We have 2 campuses that have their own dedicated DBH clinician and 2 schools that share 1 clinician. That leaves our 2 Ward 8 campuses, despite serving our highest need community, who do not have a DBH clinician at all. Our DC Prep funded clinicians must prioritize the needs of students with IEPs. And so given the volume of those students' needs, we do not have as much capacity as we need to support general education students who need counseling, often due to grief or trauma. This reflects a broader pattern: too few clinicians spread too thin to meet the needs of students. We understand why this is happening. The cost per clinician has increased significantly, but overall program funding has not. As a result, fewer clinicians can be placed, and many schools are left with partial support or are left to figure out our own solutions. From a citywide budget perspective, this makes sense, but from the standpoint of our students, it does not. If the district cannot fully staff every eligible school with a DBH clinician, schools should be allowed to receive their allocated funding directly and use it with clear guidelines to meet students' needs. This would allow students to hire and retain clinicians directly, ensure funding actually translates into services for students, create equity by ensuring every eligible school receives some level of support. We also urge the council to prioritize transparency and planning. Schools need 6 to 12 months of lead time to make staffing decisions. Changes to the model, especially those that reduce in-person support, should be phased, clearly communicated, and grounded in school-level data. To be clear, we want to partner with DBH. We appreciate that they have continued to innovate to try to better respond to the challenges that we are all trying to navigate. And we see bright spots in their pilot program 1B, which has allowed some schools to hire from their own pipelines. Those efforts should be expanded, not limited. With stronger communication and timelines that reflect the realities of school year planning, we believe that more schools like DC Prep would be able to utilize this kind of opportunity to better meet the needs of students. I also want to speak to the need to continue to support CHAMPS to do the important work that they do for students. It's essential to have experts who understand the needs of young people, particularly in these very high-stakes crisis moments. In short, our students can't wait for a perfect system. They need consistent, high-quality mental health supports now. And at DC Prep, and I know many of my colleagues, were ready to be part of the solution. We just ask that the system be designed to let schools like ours help to deliver on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Natalie Smith?
Good morning, Chairperson Henderson, committee members and staff. You guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, I'm in a not in a school building. My name is Dr. Natalie Smith, and I'm the founder and CEO of Global Citizens Public Charter School, a dual language immersion public charter school located in Ward 7. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. Mental health is not an add-on for our students. It's foundational. Our students arrive each day with incredible strengths, rich lived experiences, and resilience shaped by their families and communities. At the same time, many are navigating stressors related to community violence, trauma, and unmet behavioral needs, health needs. When those needs go unaddressed, they directly affect students' ability to learn, regulate emotions, and fully access their education. At Global Citizens, approximately 75% of our students live in wards 7 and 8, and 44.9% of our students are considered at risk. We currently serve students in pre-K 3 through 3rd grade, and we will grow to 4th grade next year and 5th grade the year after. That means we are supporting very young children during critical development years, when early and consistent mental health intervention matters deeply. We appreciate the district's commitment to school-based mental health and recognize the very real workforce and budget challenges DBH is navigating. We also appreciate DBH's engagement with charter LEAs and want to be genuine partners in strengthening this work. At the same time, we remain deeply concerned that many charter campuses still lack a DBH-provided mental health professional, and that the current approach does not increase the number of providers available in schools. At Global Citizens, we currently do not have a DBH-provided mental health clinician. For a year and a half, our school went without a licensed clinician from a community-based organization partner due to a vacancy. During that time, we continued to work in good faith with DBH, completing the environmental scan and waiting for support. Then in late September of this school year, we were notified that due to budget reallocation, schools without an active licensed clinician would be removed from the program with just 1 week's notice. For our school community, this was devastating. What was most concerning was that these decisions were informed by an environmental scan many school leaders believed was a conversation about current challenges, not a process that would determine future service delivery models. And after the last hearing, we finally received the environmental scan data, and some of our schools' information was significantly inaccurate. For example, our special education population was listed as 8.08%, when the correct figure is 16.7%. The data also incorrectly showed that we have 4 mental health providers and 2 partnerships. That makes it even more concerning that this information was used to categorize schools and shape service decisions. When data is inaccurate and schools are not given a meaningful opportunity to review and correct it before decisions are finalized, it undermines trust and increases the risk that students will not receive the support they actually need. Abrupt changes like these disrupt continuity of care, undermine trust, and force schools to backfill services using limited per pupil funds, often at the expense of academics or enrichment. In response to these gaps, we made the difficult decision to fund an internal school counselor. That was a critical investment, but it required real trade-offs. To cover this cost, we were unable at the time to invest in additional academic intervention supports, family engagement capacity, and enrichment programming. Even with this sacrifice, one school counselor is not sufficient to meet the level of complexity of need in our school community, particularly because we do not currently have any DBH-provided clinician support. In a pre-K through elementary school setting, social emotional needs arise frequently and require immediate in-person support. Without access to an embedded licensed clinician, students with higher needs cannot receive ongoing clinical care, and families often experience delays or disruption in support.
Dr. Smith, I'm so sorry if you were about a minute over your time. If you could
sorry.
wrap.
Yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up. Sorry about that. I wasn't following the time. As DBH moves towards, well, let me just say this. I urge DBH and the committee to use lessons learned from the school-based mental health pilot program to design a more accessible and effective path forward. I encourage DBH to continue investing in the clinician pipeline solution, including licensure reciprocity with neighboring states and residency pathways that help schools access qualified mental health professionals. We remain committed to partnering with the district to ensure all students, especially the most vulnerable, have timely, equitable access to high quality mental health support. Thank you so much for your unwavering commitment to DC's children.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay. Lavinia?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good morning.
All right, great. Thank you. So good day. Before I start, I must express the shock and dismay I feel from hearing through the grapevine that DBH removed CHAMPS from their budget entirely. With that said, I'm testifying to express serious concerns about the impact of the proposed FY27 budget on children's mental health crisis services and to urge the council to reinstate full funding for CHAMPS, the district's only mobile crisis response program exclusively serving youth and children. The proposed budget reduces CHAMP's funding to $135,000, mirroring last year's proposal that was later determined to be an error. We are concerned this figure has reappeared and are seeking immediate clarification. Regardless, further funding reductions would have severe and immediate consequences for children and families in crisis. First, weakening youth crisis services places additional strain on already overburdened emergency room departments and law enforcement. Second, cuts to crisis responses disrupt continuity of care for youth with complex needs. Third, reductions in school-based behavioral health services limit early intervention and prevention. CHAMPs play a critical role in diverting children from emergency room departments, inpatient psychiatric hospitalizations, and police involvement. Without CHAMPs, families lose access to timely, developmentally appropriate crisis response, and the district risks reversing years of progress towards a public health-centered approach to behavioral health emergencies. We respectfully request that the council restore $1.3 million in funding for CHAMPs, an increase of $620,000 over the current allocation of $680,000. This funding will stabilize the program and ensure continued access to life-saving services for children and families across the district. Restoring funding for CHAMPs is a cost-effective, evidence-based investment that protects children, supports family, and strengthens the district's behavioral health crisis continuum. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Bria?
Good morning, Chairperson Henderson. My name is Bria Mathis, and I serve as the Director for the CHAMPS program. I'm here to request that funding be reallocated to support the continuation of CHAMPS program. I was recently informed that there are plans to eliminate CHAMPS and bring these services in-house. Doing so would result in the loss of 17 years of specialized expertise in serving youth in crisis. Expertise that is critical to delivering effective, client-centered care. At a time where 1 in 9 youth in DC have seriously considered suicide, according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and the district is facing a youth mental health crisis that requires more specialized support, not less. Since funding was reduced, our ability to respond has significantly been impacted. Since between October 2025 and April 2026, the number of crisis calls we were unable to respond to in person has increased from 34 to 100, an increase of 194%. During that same period, our in-person response capacity was decreased by 41%, dropping from 210 responses with the capacity for 21 staff to 124 responses with only 8 staff. At the same time, demand is rising. We have received 604 calls so far this fiscal year, compared to 517 during the same period last year, a 16.8% increase. Notably, 257 of those calls were from schools where existing mental health supports were unable to manage the crisis, resulting in requests for CHAMPS services. This combination of increased demand and decreased capacity has created a clear service gap. Where in-person response is not available, youth are more likely to experience worsening symptoms, increased emergency room utilization, avoidable hospitalizations, and sometimes unnecessary involvement with law enforcement. CHAMPS also provides critical services beyond crisis response, including clinical consultations with treatment teams to develop long-term solutions for youth who frequently experience crises, and trainings for school and community providers on how to effectively utilize crisis services. This support would be lost if the program is eliminated. While the potentially receiving program may already be operational, there are concerns that staff are not adequately trained to work with youth in crisis. Losing CHAMP's experienced workforce creates a real risk to the quality of care. I respectfully urge the council to reallocate $1.3 million to support the continuation of the CHAMPS program. With this funding, we can expand staffing by 4.5 positions, increasing our ability to respond in person, improve service quality, and strengthen oversight. Right now, the need is increasing, capacity is decreasing, and without action, the gap will continue to grow. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much to this panel of witnesses. Ms. Ms. Mathis, I feel like this is the second year in a row where you've come to the hearing and you're like, I've heard through the grapevine that they're cutting CHAMPS funding. And it wasn't a conversation that had happened prior or an explanation of what does the transition kind of look like. Can you just, because you were speaking very fast, can you just go over your stats yet again? Because I just want folks to understand that even though you all are not at full capacity in terms of all of the hours that you used to do, you're still taking thousands of calls.
Yes. We so far this year we've been unable to respond to 100 calls, which is an increase from the 34 from last fiscal year, which is, like I said, is an increase of 194%. So far, we've received 604 calls, and this is an increase from the same time period last year from 517, which is also a 16.8% increase. And 257 of those calls were directly from schools, which means that the mental health provider that was or was not present was unable to manage the crisis, resulting in CHAMPS needing to be contacted.
Okay, this is super helpful. Thank you. Thank you for being here as well. Natalie and Laura, thank you for being here and for bringing the perspective of school leaders in. I'm curious if you could just sort of speak to one of my concerns is around the timing. And even if, DBH were to bring back the pilot programs that they had done before, you guys have already started the hiring cycle for next school year, correct? I don't know if Dr. Smith is still with us, but Laura, you can certainly speak to that.
Yeah, I think you're highlighting something that's really important, which is DBH needs to be really intentional about thinking about the timing of when schools make staffing decisions for the following year. I think we're in a somewhat unique position because of the work that we've been doing over the last few years to try and build our own clinicians by investing in some of our teachers to get the requisite degree that would allow them to work as social workers within our schools. But you're right that would be sort of generally a challenge for schools to find out too late to then make the right hiring decisions.
Yeah, Dr. Smith, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I just echo what Laura said. Timing does matter. As a school only in our 5th year, we have limited resources, and so the timing is imperative.
Yeah, I'm also just Laura, you guys you're eligible for 6 clinicians. You only have 3. Earlier, we heard testimony from Miriam Hauser at Mary Center, and she said DBH won't say what CBOs are selected until mid-May. So you don't even know if the 3 you have will continue, or if the 6 you're eligible for, if you'll continue to remain eligible. Has there been any conversations with school leaders and DBH about the program? Them talking to providers is one thing, but actually talking to the schools, I think, is something completely different.
It's really, it's always fascinating to come to these hearings and to hear all the things that I'm like, wow, this is news that I need to go and look into, because it's very concerning to hear that we may not even have the clinicians that are already in place. So to hear that might get lost is scary.
Okay. All right.
Can I just add on one quick thing?
Sure.
Dr. Henderson, I think the biggest thing too is that we've tried to communicate with DBH across the year, and it's sometimes very difficult to even get a response back via email. And so I think I just want to stamp again the communication, and the timely communication is going to be imperative, even for Laura and DC Prep and other charter schools.
Yeah, this is a frustrating thing. It's something we've had an issue with some of our other agencies who have sort of worked through it. But if you're running a school-based program and you're not talking to school leaders, then that's a problem. And just talking to DCPS when we've got as many LEAs as we do is also a problem. And I think it is incredibly lazy to suggest that they can't talk to charter schools because there's so many of you. Womp womp, right? Like, do the work, but also there are associations and alliances, et cetera, who can sort of pull that together. So this is incredibly disappointing to hear that school leaders have not even been part of these conversations. We're told at, what is today? April 20th, that the clinicians that you currently have in your building may not be there next year, and good luck to you. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna leave it there. Mr. Doyle, thank you so much for being here. Dr. Hagan earlier, thank you for being here as well. Ms. Davis will certainly ask some questions. We're definitely gonna ask questions about St. Elizabeth's and the cuts that they're making there. Laura, sorry, go ahead.
I know that I'm stating the obvious, but like, to also hear about that at the same time that we're having all of these like budget conversations about what resources will be available for next year. I mean, where my brain immediately went was like, holy cow, how am I going to figure out how to cover that like additional need, which just like creates more pressure on a budget that already feels really stretched. So I just, I'm sure that you're super aware of that, but like, that's like just really hard to hear that is something that I still would have been stressed to plan for, but now just like adds that much more stress to a very tight budget.
Yep, no, I hear you. Okay. As I was saying, Ms. Davis will certainly ask questions around the cuts to St. Elizabeth's. I don't know if anybody watched the hearing in January and was like, yeah, St. Elizabeth's can deal with less. Because I think even a month ago, 2 weeks ago, when was your last meeting? 2 weeks ago, we got nurses who's still worried about security. So, okay, I don't know. We'll get there when we get there. We'll have that conversation on Friday. But thank you so much to all of the witnesses for being here and your continued advocacy on behalf of district residents, young and small and old as well. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to our next panel. Rachel White, Aurelia Gavins, maybe, Dawn Smith, Tara Brown, Carol Parks, and Daniela Gonzalez Rui. Okay, Rachel, when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Henderson and members of the committee. My name is Rachel and I serve as the Deputy Director of Youth Advocacy at DC Action. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm here to speak about youth mental health in the district, particularly for young people experiencing homelessness, and to raise concerns about how the proposed reductions will impact access to care, system capacity, and long-term outcomes. On paper, the district does have a behavioral health system that includes core service agencies, crisis response, and supports for transition age youth. But what young people consistently tell us through surveys, through focus groups, and what our data confirms is that simply having services available does not mean that they are truly accessible. In DC Action's 2025 Youth Mental Health Survey of over 100 young people, nearly 65% reported wanting mental health support but not receiving it, while 77% reported they had accessed services at some point, but many were unable to stay connected to care. Young people describe not knowing where to go, long wait times, cost barriers, providers constantly changing. We hear things like, my counselor kept switching, or I didn't know how to get help once I lost my provider. For young people, access means able to get a response, start care, and stay connected over time, which is not consistently happening today. When funding is reduced for school-based services by $6 million and other system access points, such as crisis response and forensic services, it changes how the system operates. Fewer clinicians are available in schools, wait lists grow longer, and referral pathways break down. I won't go into too much detail on the reductions of school-based behavioral health in CHAMPS because you have heard that today already, and it will be included in my written testimony. Again, at the same time, when young people cannot access timely community-based cares, needs worsen, crises become more frequent, and the system is forced to respond at a higher level of intensity. This leads to increased use of emergency rooms, more interaction, and greater strain on crisis response systems. When individuals have consistent specialized care, they're less likely to rely on emergency services and more likely to experience stable outcomes. Reductions in behavioral health services do not reduce need. They simply shift the need into higher cost, more reactive parts of the system. For young people experiencing homelessness, these impacts are even more pronounced. Behavioral health services are not a secondary support, they are a core component of stability. In 2024, 57% of non-parenting young people and 53% of parenting district youth experiencing homelessness reported having repaired mental health, including depression, anxiety, PTSD, and substance use. When those needs are not met, it becomes harder to maintain housing, re-engage in employment, and education. We also want to acknowledge that we have consistently heard from the DC Council, specifically the Health Committee, that workforce shortages limit the system's ability to expand. We agree this is a real and important constraint, and we have intentionally shifted our focus toward the workforce as a key strategy. However, there are still critical gaps. According to the DBH performance oversight responses, the district is not currently tracking the number of youth specialized or transition age youth trained providers across the system. Workforce initiatives are limited in scale relative to need, and we are not seeing sufficient growth in peer support roles. At the same time, key youth-specific trainings are offered only a limited number of times per year. If workforce is the constraint, then we must be able to measure it, grow it, and align it with young people who are trying to access services. Finally, behavioral health services do not operate in isolation. The district is simultaneously proposing reductions to behavioral health services and youth homelessness services with a cut of $2.5 million. These systems are deeply interconnected. When mental health services decrease, youth are less likely to stabilize. Crisis increases. We cannot reduce capacity in both systems at the same time and expect improved outcomes. Thank you. I know that I'm over time, and so that's all I wanted to say. Right now, too many young people, especially those experiencing homelessness, are not being able to access the system. We ask that you restore funding for youth behavioral health services and work with the Department of Human Services and the Human Services Committee to restore the $2.5 million in cuts from DHS. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gavins.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Good day, Councilmember Henderson and the members of the committee. My name is Aurelia Gavins, and I'm the Director of Early Learning at the Early Childhood Innovation Network, or EASIN. EASIN is a collaborative of health and education providers, community-based organizations, researchers, and advocates working to promote mental health for families and children from pregnancy through age 5 in Washington, D.C. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on FY27 budget. I will focus on the importance of healthy futures and school-based behavioral health services as part of a strong early childhood system. Healthy Futures is an evidence-based early childhood mental health consultation program that supports children's social and emotional development while addressing individual needs. By reaching infants and young children early, it helps lay the foundation for long-term success in school, health, and economic stability. The program also builds the capacity of educators and childcare providers to better support children's development. It's a proven prevention and early intervention model in the district. As I engage with early learning programs across the district, I consistently hear from educators about the rise in stress due to classroom challenges, behavioral challenges, and increased workforce demands. Healthy Futures supports, particularly the infant and early childhood mental health consultation. It plays a critical role in addressing these challenges. They promote the well-being of children, educators, and caregivers alike. Through classroom consultation, behavioral support, and staff well-being efforts, the program strengthens how early learning environments respond to children's social-emotional needs. Educators report improvements in their classroom practices, their own personal well-being, and their overall workforce environment. It's In a difficult budget environment, we appreciate the proposed FY27 budget cut, that it only includes a minimum cut to Healthy Futures. And we urge the council to maintain funding at $3.2 million so young children, their families, and early learning staff can continue to access these critical supports. While Easton is not a provider of school-based behavioral health programs, we strongly support the continued presence of behavioral health clinics in DC schools. These services are vital for the continuum of care for young children and their families. It's critical that the total funding for school-based behavioral health is maintained and that a sufficient portion is directed to community-based organizations. I urge the council to support the full continuum of mental health care for children 0 to 5. Sustain investments in early childhood mental health services is essential to promoting healthy development and long-term well-being. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Dawn Smith?
Good morning. How are you today, Councilmember Henderson? My name is Dawn Smith. I am a member of PAVE Citywide Board, and I have 3 wonderful children, 2 who have graduated, and my youngest who is a first grader at Van Ness Elementary. And I'm here to talk about the importance of fully funding school-based mental health and prioritizing maintaining relationships as DBH implements its comprehensive plan. My youngest daughter, Faith, is in the first grade. She has received school-based mental health services through the CBO True Youth Center at her school for 2 years now. Faith has built a strong relationship with her clinician, Ms. Gabby. Ms. Gabby has helped Faith learn how to manage her emotions, how to express herself, and is working with Faith to give her the tools to improve her focus in class. Faith is an energetic first grader who has big emotions, and Ms. Gabby gives her the tools to navigate those. Access to clinicians has been a game changer for my daughter. As we navigate getting Faith a 504B plan, Ms. Gabby has played, an integral role in ensuring that Faith's needs are met. This year's FY27 budget proposed a $6 million cut to school-based mental health services. I am deeply concerned that this will negatively impact Faith's access to her clinician at Van Ness. Not only am I worried about what will happen with Faith, but I also worry about all the other children who have built positive relationships with their clinicians and how a $6 million cut will impact their ability to receive services. My passion for preserving school-based mental health services is not just personal. When students have access to the tools they need to manage their emotions, the entire school community wins. Our students are able to focus on their academics and work towards achieving their dreams when equitable with all the tools they need to be successful. This is why I'm advocating for the $6 million to be restored to school-based mental health, and be accessible to all students. I also urge the council to prioritize relationships when implementing DBH's comprehensive plan. Clinicians, whether they come from a CBO or DBH, have built strong relationships with school communities and their students. These meaningful relationships are not easy to replace and take time and intentional to build. As CBOs are phased out of schools and some schools have a cluster-based approach to mental health, I am deeply concerned about the disruption this will cause to relationships. Faith has grown because she has a positive relationship with Ms. Gabby. She sees Miss Gabby as a trusted adult who is on her team and is deeply invested in her success. I want Faith and other students like Faith to thrive. That requires access to clinicians whom they trust and have a positive relationship with. Phasing out CBOs will disrupt these relationships. While I understand that the cluster-based approach, I am concerned about how it will disrupt the frequency with the students that have access to clinicians. As DBH moves forward, I urge the council to ensure that it clears communication it's about, clear communications about timelines and impact with schools, students, and families. I know this is my time, and I do appreciate your time and allow me to testify today.
Thank you. Tara? Or Tara Brown? I don't know if she's here. Okay. Carol Parks?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good morning, Council Chair Henderson, and council members. My name is Carol Parks. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Hillcrest Children and Family Center. Hillcrest is one of the oldest organizations in the country, definitely in DC. We just celebrated 210 years of services to families, youth, adults in the community. I mentioned during the last oversight hearing my concerns with DBH comprehensive plan and their school-based behavioral healthcare expansion grant, how they were planning on implementing that. While DBH has had many listening sessions, they met with school representatives. We even recently, as of last week, met with a program evaluator paid by DBH for last feedback. But it appears that all that feedback that's being provided will not be used for the next school year. And looking through the DBH's FY26 budget, it shows a $6 million decrease while increasing DBH's FTEs by 58. This is very much evident that the information that's being presented and the feedback that has been provided has not been truly integrated into their plan. The current plan looks at removing many of the CBOs and only having 3 or 4 CBOs. We just received last week the criteria that would be used, and then we've been, we've been informed that as of mid-May, the selection process will have occurred. I don't believe that's sound planning. I don't think that is great for the system. While I applaud Dr. Bazran and Dr. Scott for their review, I believe that there needs to be a pause put into that implementation until all the information has been set forth and is available. A couple months ago, the DCBHA and with other CBOs offered DBH some alternative models that they should consider. 4 models, which we really supported, at least 2 of those models moving forward. I do not believe that as of my testimony in this hearing, that model has been incorporated or even been reviewed in the capacity that it was provided. Well, I understand DBH has many other priorities outside of school base. When I looked at FY27 budget, which puts a lot of pressure overall on the system, I'm greatly concerned about how the impact on Medicaid, the lack of execution of provider purchase orders. I will say that as of last week, DBH did pay us some of the funds that we were owed. My other concern is about the $9 million that is going to be eliminated or reduced from the SUD. We all know that substance use disorder is a major issue that impacts our system of care. While I agree with the fact that if there is fraud, waste, and abuse, they need to take actions to eliminate those agencies. But there are agencies such as Hillcrest and others that are doing great work providing quality care. And we believe that there's a different way that they need to implement that, which could lead to some cost-saving strategies. I know my time is up, but I do want to say I applaud DBH and DC Healthcare Finance for exploring a model that we've been incorporated here at Hillcrest, a CCBHC model, which I believe should move to the next system so we can look at integrated care. Another model that I would ask that be considered as well is what's called an ACO model. I think if we could look at all these different areas, we would find cost savings, and we'll also find increasing continuity of care. In closing, while I understand the fiscal pressures for the mayor's budget for FY27, we ask DBH to continue fund school-based programming, fund the SUD at a current level, and get rid of eliminate bad actors and increase local payments and consider CCBHC and then a future down the road, an ACO model for future consideration. Thank you again. I will provide my written testimony. I apologize for my going over my time limit.
Thank you. All right, Daniela?
Hello.
Good morning, Chairperson Henderson and members of the Committee on Health. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today about DBH's FY27 budget. I am Daniela Gonzalez Rios, the Health Justice Coordinator at Advocates for Justice and Education. The urgency of expanding and protecting school-based behavioral health services becomes more evident as we witness the city face increased criminalization of youth, cuts to SNAP and TANF, and the criminalization of mental illness. Families are also navigating heightened ICE presence, housing instability, and reductions in Medicaid and DC Healthcare Alliance coverage. As these critical safety nets continue to deplete, the need for responsive SBBH services continue to increase, especially for youth living in constant fear, anxiety, and instability. Based on the proposed FY27 budget, we are deeply concerned about the $6.1 million reduction to the SBBH program, particularly with DBH's intention to hire 58 FTE positions. This proposed shift is even more troubling given DBH's intent to move away from the CBO model and transition SBBH services in-house. This plan would disrupt established relationships and leave schools without a clinician during the transition period until new hires complete the hiring process, meaning schools won't have clinicians until the middle of the following school year, which does not account for the additional time required to cultivate trust with students and the broader school community. This is especially concerning because any gap in clinician coverage impacts all students' ability to access support within their school community, especially for those who rely on these services through their behavioral and individualized educational plans. The proposed budget also raises serious concerns regarding the CHAMPS program and CRT. Schools have consistently expressed they are not adequately resourced or staffed to safely manage the increasing complexity of student mental health crisis. The attacks on CHAMPS and CRT create a significant risk of service gaps at precisely the moment when students are most in need of consistent, trained, and trusted support. Without stable funding and staffing, both crisis response and ongoing behavioral health services in schools will be further strained, undermining student safety and continuity of care. We respectfully urge the committee to preserve the existing FY26 funding level for SBBH, maintain and strengthen the partnerships with community-based organizations rather than shifting services entirely in-house, clarify and correct the CHAMPS funding discrepancy and increase funding, and ensure that the crisis response systems are adequately funded and better aligned with school-based services. Thank you for your time, and I hope we can count on your leadership to lean in and advocate to intentionally invest in the mental health and well-being of DC children.
Thank you. Ms. Brown?
Good morning still, maybe, or oh, no, afternoon. Good afternoon, Councilmember Henderson. My name is Tara Brown. I'm a Ward 6 resident and member of PAVE's Advisory Board. My daughter suffers from severe social anxiety and clinical depression. I discovered her condition after a failed attempt at suicide. Once she was diagnosed, I set out to find a therapist for her. We went through 6 therapists before we found the right one. Having the right mental health supports makes all the difference. She trusts her therapist. She can talk to her therapist. It saved her life. If you plan to remove trusted CBOs with established relationships with our kids, please consider the consequences. On paper, this may seem like a way to give more kids services, but the opposite will happen. Your plans to remove 80 CBOs already operating in schools is based on the premise that you will hire 58 in-house clinicians to replace the CBOs you remove. The premise is not based in reality. When the council allocated $81 million to put a clinician in every school, it uncovered a serious shortage of clinicians. Although the money was there was not enough clinicians to fill the spots. Not much has changed. Even after their salaries were increased, you will not be able to hire, not much has changed after their salaries were increased. You will not be able to hire 59 clinicians, and once you remove the 80 CBOs, the students in desperate need of mental health support will have nothing. The other issue that will leave more children without support instead of increasing the number of children you are attempting to reach, is the timeline. Schools start in October, in August. The fiscal year starts in October. This is a 2-month gap where the schools affected by your removal of their CBOs will have no coverage. Then everyone who works or has ever worked for the government knows that the hiring process is a lengthy one, as you have said already today. How many more months will it be before the hiring and background checks are completed? We are talking about children who need consistent mental health supports. Sorry. And the necessary foundations of social and emotional learning. School-based mental health is not some government program that can afford to stall or stop. For a lot of kids, like my daughter, it is a matter of life and death. DBH can't get this wrong. You need to seriously listen to the many concerns being voiced, be realistic about the ability to hire, and not do anything that will interrupt services. This plan has to be about more than saving money. Trim your budget elsewhere, never at the expense of our kids. Save them before you save money. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the testimony of this panel of witnesses. I just have a couple of follow-up questions. Mr. Parks, if you're still here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so this is interesting day because I'm sort of putting together pieces here of who's talking to who about what's going to happen next in terms of the program. And it seems that you have information that the school leaders on my last panel didn't have information about. When's the last time you talked to DBH about what the process was going to be? And what were your thoughts on the criteria that they outlaid for how CBOs would be selected?
We had a meeting with DBH last Monday, and on Wednesday they provided the actual criteria. The metrics that are in the criteria are what I would call are not specialized for special populations, other type of groups. So I think it's more of a one size fit all, and that criteria, I think will put agencies at risk because it'll be hard to actually meet the criteria. There's like 8 different metrics in there, and even we have 25 schools. We're probably the largest school-based provider. 25 schools, therapists with 30 schools. While I think that our numbers based on that criteria might put us in the 80 to 85% metrics, I don't believe that it will yield the plan that they're looking for. So, and we just got it on Wednesday, and then we were informed that mid-May they will select the providers, which is very troubling based upon timelines.
Okay. All right. This is helpful. I don't have any further questions for this group. Always good to hear parents. So thank you so much to Tara and Dawn for being vulnerable enough to provide your perspective in terms of your own experiences with your children. So thank you so much to this panel of witnesses. If you haven't provided written testimony for the record, please be sure to do so. Okay, we're going to go to our next panel. Judy Ashburn, Nancy Boyd, Serena Childress, Tracy White, Catrice Turner, and Morgan Denny. Again, you have to affirmatively accept our invitation to become a panelist. It's like surprising that Judy is right there. Okay, Judy, we see you in the waiting room. but you have to accept our invitation. But while we wait, I'll go to Dr. Boyd, who is here.
Uh,
Go
Good
ahead.
morning, Chairperson Henderson and members of the committee. I'm Nancy Boyd. I represent the frontline nurses in the District of Columbia as president. And currently I'm speaking on, for the nurses, I represent the District of Columbia Department of Behavioral Health, including those nurses at St. Elizabeth's Hospital and Comprehensive Psychiatric Emergency Program. I'm here again to speak on patient safety, staffing, and how these issues are directly tied to budget decisions and operational misalignment. Currently, we have been meeting with the deputy mayor regarding some things and marking our second meeting that we had on April 8th. The concerns remain deep and unaddressed. It's a clear disconnect between executive leadership and the realities of what workers on the ground are doing. There's continued serious concerns about supply shortages, unsafe conditions, staffing gaps, and security failures. These aren't new issues. We've been voicing them for years. We voiced them in January, voiced them last year in May. And these concerns create a low morale and undermines the respect for leadership at Department of Behavioral Health. We continue to report shortages of basic supplies such as gloves, test strips. There's security gaps on units and entry points, unsafe high acuity units, and environmental concerns including pests, holes in ceilings, doors missing from individual and care bathrooms, and reduced patient resources due to the structural and functional issues in our learning centers. These are not inconveniences, they're patient safety risks. At the same time, DBH is operating under unstable financial conditions, including inconsistent reimbursements and heavy reliance on overtime. Instead of building sustainable staffing models, overtime is being used to fill longstanding vacancies, and this brings to a critical issue that involves workplace violence and lack of security presence. There's not enough trained security personnel consistently stationed on these high acuity units. As a result, nurses are expected to manage violent situations without proper support. Nurses are no longer functioning fully in their therapeutic roles. They're being forced into defensive roles, essentially acting as security without the protection or training. This leads to reduced therapeutic care, increased burnout and morale, higher risk for both staff and patients. There's no consistency or space for care delivery in these environments. This is a funding and prioritization issue without investment in unit-based security staffing, workplace violence prevention, sustainable staffing models, and they all fall on the burden of the nurses. At the same time, the mayor's proposed removal of $127 million in future pay increases will worsen staffing instability, cannot address workforce shortages while cutting compensation in a high-cost environment. In closing, the conditions at St. Elizabeth's and CPEP are still result in misalignment between funding, staff, and operational reality. You cannot fix a behavioral health system by cutting the people who hold it together. And you cannot expect safe care environments when nurses are forced to function as security in systems that fail to invest in their protection. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Judy? Judy, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Council member, Chairperson Henderson, and council members. My name is Judy Ashburn. I'm the board chair of the DC Addiction Treatment and Recovery Coalition, and also a Ward 8 resident for the past 40 years. So thank you for the opportunity to testify to the Committee on Health of DBH Budget Oversight hearing. So I'm here on behalf of the DC Addiction Treatment and Recovery Coalition to address three major issues, past and present, affecting the 4 remaining SUD residential treatment centers in the district, which 6 years ago, there were 7 of us. The first issue is an urgent request to DBH from the 4 residential treatment providers, Clean and Sober, Federal City, Rapgadenzia, and Samaritan Inns, to reconcile documented claims submitted in FY 24-25. Though the residential providers have done all they could to adjust to a new electronic health record, national accreditation, and a tedious authorization process through Comagin, we are now in danger of closing our doors due to unpaid claims in those years. The solution we are requesting is that DBH obtain approximately $3.5 million from the Opiate Abatement Commission to settle documented claims for these 4 organizations. This will enable us to move forward in providing sustained, consistent treatment to the district clients. The second issue regards FY26. And in FY26, the issue has been with local dollars. The residential providers are serving clients with local dollars, but have not been paid since October 2025, which continues to affect our cash flow. And we've been told that DBH is creating a new authorization protocol for the providers regarding local dollars, and it was to be given in February. We still have not received it. And this new authorization process for these outstanding payments, even though we've not received it, we're expected to give treatment to these clients that continue to show up at our door. Solution: provide authorized protocol for local dollars immediately and pay for submitted claims beginning in October 25. The third issue actually relates to the 2027 budget, and the coalition is requesting a line item for the National Alliance of Recovery Residences certification to be brought to the district. And this is something we're actually looking forward to working with DBH to bring this to the district, because it's so desperately needed to encourage transitional therapeutic housing with programs for clients completing treatment. This longer-term housing will enable the persons who finish the 60 to 90 days of treatment to save money, find employment, get individual therapy for trauma, and transition to permanent housing.
Okay,
This
Judy,
is not-
you're about a minute over your time. If you can
Okay.
wrap up.
Okay, this is not possible the way it's currently, we currently have it set up. So we look forward to finding financial and certification support for longer term SUD therapeutic housing and programs, which have been costing Samaritan Inns now about $1 million a year. We're grateful to the Opiate Abatement Commission for that, so that we can be serving 35 to 40 clients a year and want to maintain that. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Ms. Childress. Okay, don't see her. Dr. White?
Yes, I'm here.
Great, when you're ready.
All right, Chair Henderson and members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tracy White, and I am entering my 10th year serving as the CEO of Paul Public Charter Schools and celebrating my 30th year serving the children and families of the District of Columbia. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding the FY27 budget for DBH. At Paul, we see every day that student mental health is directly connected to attendance, behavior, academic achievement, and overall culture. Our students are navigating trauma, housing instability, family conflict, grief, anxiety, depression, and the lingering impacts of the pandemic. These challenges do not stay at home. They come into our school and into our classrooms every single day. We have worked very hard at Paul to build strong systems of support for our children. We provide counseling, social work services, have an amazing partnership with the CBO that I'll talk about shortly, restorative practices, and school-based behavioral health supports. However, the needs of our children and their families continue to outpace the resources that are available to them. One of our greatest concerns is around the shortage of qualified mental health professionals. Coverage gaps, clinician turnover, and difficulty recruiting staff have made it hard for schools to provide consistent care, and it make it troubling for us to believe that the DBH will be able to find 58 qualified clinicians in enough time to serve the needs of our school, our children in the fall. Consistency in this area really matters. Students who have finally built trust with a clinician can experience real setbacks when that person leaves or when services are interrupted. Additionally, we are deeply concerned about reductions to the Department of Behavioral Health's funding for CHAMPS, the district's crisis response program that schools rely on when students are experiencing acute mental health emergencies. This year, we have done internally 43 risk assessments for our students. We've had to call CHAMPS 5 times. We would have called them more. However, they have notified us that they are unable to provide the support that our students need, desperately need, because of funding shortages and staffing cuts. We've seen record numbers this year of students who require emergency assessments because of suicidal ideation, threats of self-harm, severe emotional dysregulation, and other behaviors that warranted that type of intervention. When a student is in crisis, schools need rapid, reliable responses, and delays in access to emergency assessments or crisis intervention services place our children, staff, and the broader school community at risk. Additionally, it's really important to note as it relates to CBOs that schools maintain the ability to partner with external community-based organizations that are working well for their students. At Paul, we have a phenomenal partnership with the Latin American Youth Center, and they have been extremely valuable because they provide consistency, responsiveness, and clinicians who have been able to build trust with our scholars and families. Losing them would be deeply traumatic to our students and their families. In all transparency, some of our prior experiences with DBH assigned clinicians, we've experienced a lot of turnover, inconsistent quality, and a lack of fit with the needs of our school community. We do not believe schools should be limited to whichever clinician is assigned if that partnership is not meeting the needs of our students. Schools should have flexibility and voice in selecting providers that are effective, trusted, and aligned to our school community. There's much more that I'd like to say, but I see I'm over time. So I'll just end by encouraging the district, amidst all of the other recommendations that are in my testimony that I uploaded, to continue to invest in the clinician pipeline, reciprocity agreements with neighboring states, residency programs, and more flexible grant opportunities for schools to hire their own clinicians are all important strategies. I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, there are several other points that I made in my testimony. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you this afternoon.
Thank you. Catrice?
Good afternoon, Councilmember Henderson and members of the committee. My name is Catrice Turner. I'm a native Washingtonian, a Ward 5 resident, and citywide board member with PAVE, Parents Amplifying Voices of Education. I'm also a proud mom to 4 boys within both sectors of the DC public school system and the chief of family and community engagement at Monument Academy Public Charter School in Ward 7. I'm here today to speak on the Department of Behavioral Health School Behavioral Health Services Comprehensive Expansion Plan. Let me be clear, expansion is necessary. Our young people need access to mental and behavioral health supports now more than ever. However, I want to highlight a critical gap in this plan that cannot be solved by expansion alone, and that is representation and relationship building in who is providing these services. At my school, we partner with a community-based organization that placed a clinician in our building, a Black male social worker, who my son is a scholar here, absolutely loved and adored. And I want to pause there because that alone is rare in itself. This clinician did more than provide services, he built trust. He connected with our young men in ways that many systems have historically failed to do. He engaged fathers who were otherwise disconnected from school spaces. He helped break down stigma around mental health, not just through a program, but through his presence, relatability, and consistency. He became a bridge between families and the school, between skepticism and acceptance, between silence and healing. And then he left. It was for great reasons, to continue his education, but he left. Our partnership with the organization still exists, and that slot is still technically there, but the impact is not. And there has been no one there to refill his position as of yet. Because what we lost was not just a position, we lost a person who reflected our students, who understood their lived experiences, and who made behavioral health feel accessible. And I will say plainly, I'm not confident that he will be replaced by someone who can replicate, the same level of cultural connection, particularly being a Black male clinician in a school space. So while this expansion plan may increase access, it does not yet address who those providers are, nor does it prioritize the intentional recruitment, retention, and placement of clinicians who reflect the communities that they serve. If we are serious about behavioral health, we must be serious about culturally responsive care. My ask is this, that the Department of Behavioral Health embeds clear strategies within this expansion plan to recruit and retain diverse clinicians, particularly Black male mental health professionals, and ensure that schools serving predominantly Black and Brown students are prioritized for those placements. Further, we must restore the $6 million in funding proposed for the school-based mental health program in fiscal year 27 in order to ensure the school-based mental health program has the funding it needs to serve as many students and families as possible. Because access without trust is not access, and services without connection will not yield the outcomes we are hoping for. Our young people don't just need support; they need to see themselves in the people providing it. So I thank you for this opportunity to testify, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Morgan? Okay. Hans Thomas is going to speak on behalf of Serena.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I don't have much to add to what was also said by members from St. Elizabeth's Hospital, except to say that in addition to the budget cuts that we will be facing, the budget issues that we needed to address, what we testified about in December, have still not been addressed. There are ongoing meetings, but there's been very little material advancement to the problems we testified on regarding patient safety and patient care and status of repairs and disrepair on the units, HVAC systems, supplies, and so on. Any further budget cuts to the organization will prevent any of that from happening, essentially. We're still understaffed. We still don't have enough security. That's pretty much all I have to add.
All right. Thank you, Thomas. Okay, Morgan has joined us. Morgan?
Yes, hi, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Henderson and members of the committee. My name is Morgan Denny, and I am the shelter manager at DC Safe, the district's only 24/7 crisis intervention agency for survivors of domestic violence. Domestic violence is not only a safety issue, it is a behavioral health crisis. Every day, survivors arrive at our shelter in acute distress, experiencing trauma, anxiety, depression, and in some cases, suicidal ideation. At the same time, existing behavioral health challenges can increase vulnerability to abuse and escalate the severity of violence. We often describe our work as the domestic violence emergency room. Survivors come to us in crisis, and our role is to stabilize them and connect them to longer-term care. But stabilization without consistent, accessible behavioral health support is incomplete and at times unsafe. The Department of Behavioral Health is a critical partner in our work. We rely on DBH in moments both of crisis and as survivors begin to rebuild stability. Their partnership in the lethality assessment program is essential to reaching those at highest risk. At the same time, we do see where the system is falling short. We know what works, meeting people where they are through accessible community-based care. Yet the proposed FY27 budget moves away from this model rather than strengthening the coordinated community-based response that survivors depend on. We stand with the Fair Budget Coalition and urge the committee to maintain funding for the school-based behavioral health program, restore funding for CHAMPS, and protect the behavioral health court urgent care clinic. We also urge the council to fully resource DBH in a way that reflects the realities survivors face. Survivors, especially those with significant mental health needs, encounter real barriers to care. Long wait times, multiple intake processes, and disconnected systems make it difficult to access support in moments of crisis and even harder to stay engaged over time. Our work shows what is needed, a proactive, responsive system that is easy to access and grounded in community. Embedding mental health services within existing continuums of care and strengthening coordination across systems makes support more reachable and more effective. Finally, we want to name a critical gap. There are limited pathways for individuals who are causing harm to access behavioral health support outside of the court system. Survivors are often left with impossible choices. Expanding behavioral health pathways specific to those perpetrating abuse is essential to prevention and improving health outcomes. We recognize that this is a difficult budget year, but investments in DBH are preventative. They reduce crisis, improve stability, and strengthen public safety. Thank you for your time and your commitment to district residents. I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. Thank you so much to this panel of witnesses. Lots of different issues that were raised. Ms. Ashburn, I just want to say that I sent a letter the week before last to Director Turnage and Director Bazaron with regard to some of the payment issues that you and other providers have raised. I'm going to assume they received the email, although nobody has acknowledged receipt, but I'm going to assume that they did. And it included a memo that sort of broke down all of the things that you talked about and asked them to address some of these provider issues. So thank you for being here and for uplifting that again. Dr. Boyd, thank you for being here on behalf of the nurses. My staff is in those meetings with you all. So I was a bit surprised to see that the proposed budget cut for St. Elizabeth's, which goes in contrast to what we've been talking about. I could say the same for Mr. Hans, but I'm hearing that the staff is asking for more, not less. More security, more support, better materials, opening up all the access lines in terms of being able to provide additional services to patients. I don't know if you wanted to say more.
Yeah, there happens to be a significant I guess distinction between what is understood as needed and what is actually money being put into. It's very uncertain how things are being managed with the way that what they're putting money into, because now it's a robbing Peter to pay Paul situation where they're taking money from other resources and putting it elsewhere. So I don't see how any of this is going to be sustainable, even moving on into next year, because granted they're hiring a whole bunch of people, but that doesn't mean like there's still issues with now you're taking money from somewhere else. So it's not, I don't think we're dealing with a leadership that kind of like doesn't want to accept the fact like they're not doing a good job. They're not managing the overtime. They're not trying to put in any interventions to change anything or to create an environment where the patients are getting what they're needed and the staff are being supported in the way they need to be supported. And it's across the board. It's not just nurses. We're just the ones speaking right now.
I see. I hear you. All right. Well, thank you for being here. I don't have any further questions for the rest of the panel. Thank you all for being here. Ms. Turner, always good to see you. If you haven't provided your testimony for the record, if you all can just upload that, that'd be great. Okay, we're going to go to our final panel, which is going to be hybrid because we have some folks here in person as well. So Shannon Walsh, Shayna Hagan, Kathy Rubel, Edie Amin, Stephen Schaff, Nadia Casey, and Grace Orderick. Okay. All right, give it a minute and let folks come in. All right, Shannon, which is not here. Okay, Shayna.
Hello. Good morning or afternoon, I guess.
Good afternoon. Yes.
My name is Shada Lamchick-Hagan, and I'm a Ward 5 parent of 2 children enrolled in our local DC public school, Burroughs Elementary. You've already heard from my husband earlier today, and I'm also testifying to express my serious concerns about DBH's proposed comprehensive plan. As you've already heard many times, the proposed plan will dramatically decrease the number of clinicians in DC public schools, an initiative that will have a devastating impact on DC students and their families. Our own experience with a CBO-employed clinician at our school has been instrumental in our older child's academic and social development, and the council should be aware of the distress and disruption that DBH's proposed comprehensive plan will cause for children across the city. Our first grader was diagnosed with autism in the summer after his pre-K 4 year. He performed well academically and was not disruptive in school, but we knew that he needed additional support, which his doctors confirmed. We were overwhelmed and initially unsure of how to access services, but Burroughs administrative staff quickly connected us to Ms. Taylor, the school's assigned clinician. Ms. Taylor is employed by April May, a CBO that had until now contracted with DBH. Ms. Taylor has been a lifeline for our son and for our family. She meets with him individually and in small groups to work on social skills, address anxiety, and even to address behavior problems at home. She now meets with my husband and me regularly to work through the challenges that we face in raising an autistic child. Ms. Taylor is a safe person at school. He knows that he can always ask to talk to her when he's having a hard day, and she works closely with his teachers to ensure that his needs are being met. She's a significant part of our decision to stay at our DC public school rather than moving to a charter, as many of our neighbors have. No charter can provide the level of services for a child that our school can, thanks to DBH's current partnerships with CBOs. Parents of neurodivergent children at local and well-respected charters are in awe when we tell them about the level of support that our family currently receives. Ms. Taylor recently informed us that after 5 years at Burroughs, she won't be returning next year because April May has opted to end its contract with DBH due to the current renegotiations related to the proposed comprehensive plan. I don't know how we are going to tell our son. He and the other students at our school receiving services from Ms. Taylor will be devastated, and we're concerned that there will be no providers available to fill the gap in services that she will leave. DBH's proposed plan leaves dramatic gaps in services across DC public schools, and if approved, many families will soon be in the same position we're in. DBH's efforts to save money may result in a mental and behavioral health crisis in our schools, and overworked school staff will be forced to take on additional caseloads that they're unequipped to handle. Like most who have spoken before me, I urge DBH to reconsider its proposed comprehensive plan and ensure full funding for SBBH in the coming year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Kathy? Okay, I don't see Kathy. All right. Dr. Amin.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for allowing us to testify today. My name is Dr. Eddie Amin, and I'm a DC resident deeply involved with a coalition called Decrim Poverty DC. And I want to urge the council to invest in a comprehensive, non-police crisis response system that prioritizes care, dignity, and public health over carceral responses. Decrim Poverty's core mission is to replace carceral systems with harm reduction-oriented systems of care that promote the dignity, autonomy, and health of all people pushed to the margins. I've been a licensed professional counselor in DC for 15 years, working with young people in the court system, several local nonprofits. What propelled me to be a part of Decrim was a gunshot from a police officer that was responding to a man who was hallucinating and only fighting with himself. His only weapon was an unbroken glass bottle, and he was killed. I hope that we can prevent situations like this. Police officers are often the default responders to mental health crises, despite not being trained clinicians. The consequences of this are clear. People with serious mental illness are almost 12 times more likely to experience police use of force, and 1 in 4 individuals with mental health conditions have a history of arrest. We know this only exacerbates symptoms and systemic inequality, especially for Black and brown people in our city. There's a better way for the Department of Behavioral Health, and it's based on something the council passed and which you brought to the council, the 2025 resolution on supporting humane and trauma-informed responses to behavioral health crisis. Thank you for naming what could be, and I hope you'll work with us and other partners to give your resolution the legislative teeth that it deserves. Decrim Poverty will return to the committee with some proposals later this year. And I'll just name 3 opportunities if I have time. The first that could start well before new legislation is restructuring the relationship between dispatch and DBH's crisis response teams. Well-designed CRT programs are designed to handle nonviolent crises. National data shows that 92% of CRT calls are nonviolent and only 2% require police backup. We've researched CRT efficacy across the country, and we have learned that DC can do better to address these crises. Current 911 system puts a lot of emphasis on operators classifying and routing calls to determine outcomes on the ground. 911 calls in DC are not tied to crisis response teams, so that's a missed opportunity. The 2 other areas that I won't have time to speak on, but one is calls for more transparency in our data. And I refer you to my written statement, but thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you today.
Thank you. Stephen? Okay. Nadia? All right. Grace, who is here in person? You just hit the button. There you go.
As I look back over my life and I think things over, I can truly say that I've been blessed because I have a testimony. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and the remaining council members and every soul present in person on virtually. I'm Grace Odrick from Ward 2 and a Consumer Advisory Board member from the Hillcrest Children's and Family Center. I'm originally from Camden, New Jersey, born in 1963, and my family moved to Washington, D.C. in 1987. I will be 63 years young on May 1st. I have lived just about 45 years with some type of mental illness. I first became a Department of Behavioral Health client in 2000 in DC. I would say that I definitely have a lot of lived experience in this mental health field as a consumer. I am blessed, mightily blessed, because of all the pain and confusion I had to endure while being raised in a very popular, filthy rich, Black Jim Jones type religious cult, where we gave my family and myself, we gave our time, money, souls, and worshiped the bishops as comforters, kings of kings, lords, masters, and saviors. And my relatives were sexually abused as children. So I do identify as a secondary rape victim. But when I asked my mother, how come you get on me for being gay when you don't even say anything about our relatives being raped as children? My mom did answer, when God is ready to deal with it, he will. I'm gonna say this, for some reason, most Black churches address gayness and mental health issues very hatefully. Anyway, I've survived all that and much more to say. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world, red and yellow, black and white. They're all precious in his sight. Even the children and youth in DC Ward 7th and 8th. But do you DC City Council members. My time is almost up. I'm just gonna say I came here to be like a Ruby Bridges. I will not be afraid anymore. I've been in St. Elizabeth. I've been in St. Howard Psych Ward. And it saddens me to hear that these things are still going on that I went through 24, 25 years ago. And then you wonder why we have the children need curfews for the youth. Stop taking away the money. If we deal with these people, the youth and the young people when they're young, we won't have to go through what we do in our communities. I thank you so much, Lord. I thank you that I made it. Keep up the good work. I know it's hard. Please, please look at it as if it was someone in your family. I want to talk to you one-on-one one day. And I thank you again. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you. Thank you to this panel of witnesses. I'm just looking to make sure that okay, all right. Well, I don't have any specific questions, but thank you to Dr. Amin and to Ms. Hagan and Ms. Ordick for being here and for providing testimony. And I want to thank all of the witnesses from today who provided testimony. If you were unable to attend or speak, the public record will remain open until Monday, May 4th at 5 p.m. Written testimony can be submitted via the council's hearing management system site at dccouncil.gov/hearings. Part 2 of this hearing will take place on Friday, April 24th at 9 a.m. We'll have the government witnesses for the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, and also the Department of Behavioral Health. So that will take place on Friday. There being no further business before the committee right now, this hearing is recessed until Friday, April 24th at 9 a.m. The time is 12:41 p.m. Thank you.